climb up to 55 on Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday we come crashing down 38, 37 with flurries and cold on Friday. And then the rest of their prognostications, it just doesn't seem relevant anymore other than to break our hearts. Now, if you've ever traveled with me and you've gotten lost, I've probably said, nice work, Magellan. What's next? That's a reference to Ferdinand Magellan, who on this day in 1520 began crossing the Pacific Ocean. There's your useless fact. I'm trying to come up with something that puts me on an even keel with knowledge with Billy. This just isn't useful knowledge. The other thing that took place today is the very first auto race took place in 1895. It was a race from Chicago to Evanston, hosted by the Chicago Times-Herald. There were 6 cars. The car that won traversed that 55-mile stretch to Evanston and back, traveling 7 miles per hour. Just think about that, man.
7?
That is a near 8-hour journey. That's not a race. That's a Bataan death march. But that was, of course, over 100 years ago. So anyway, that's what's going on in the news. In terms of the things that are going on in the day otherwise, Billy, all I can say is yesterday was one of those days where I worked almost entirely from the house. I had 2 big Zoom calls that got canceled. And Billy, I don't know how many Zoom calls you get other than Salem that you get exposed to.
Yeah, I've got a couple a week, but that's about it. Yeah.
When that happens, it's bittersweet. Because especially when they cancel at the last minute, it's like, well, dang, I could have done something else. I could have planned to go do something else. But instead, you're stuck with this hole in time where you're like, wait a minute, I'm at home. I have a hole in time. What can I do? So Chunky George decided I'm going to try to not lose everything I've done with this getting prepared for the marathon thing. And I hopped back on the Peloton for the first time in over a month.
Yeah.
And just did one for anyone that has a Peloton or something like it. This was the setting that was not somebody screaming at you or trying to cheer you on or any of that crap. It was just ride. And I think it's called Just Ride. And so I put
beginner. That's where it's beginner.
Well, I mean, they don't want you to know that it's a beginner setting, but they called it Just Ride. You're kind of setting your own pace.
Yeah.
And then, so I did that, put up the little TV in a place where I could see it there in the basement area. And started the process of finishing up my watching of a Netflix animated series called, wait for it, Blue Eye Samurai.
Oh,
now,
interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty good, man. There's, the problem with encouraging the boys to watch it. Trey, I guess I don't care as much, but there's some sexy stuff in there. You know what I mean? Nothing graphic, but there's some sexy stuff in there.
So you're doing a little anime.
Yeah, is it anime? What's the difference between animated and anime? Like, is The Simpsons anime?
No, because anime has to do with this particular style. It's the big eyes. It's very
No,
angular
that's not this.
shapes, things like that. So
that's not this.
No, okay. So
no, but it's a good story. It is a good, traditionally kind of Japanese sort of story with a couple twists in there that I thought were very interesting.
Because if you were going to do anime, I was gonna send you down a rabbit hole of some stuff that's
no,
amazing.
Please don't. I mean, you've already done. Every one of my kids has at some point, thanks to Billy, asked me at one point, "Is this K-pop?"
Yes, exactly. You're welcome.
Like at one point, there was some music playing. I don't even know where the hell we were, and I go, "Oh, is that Blackpink?"
Yeah.
And my son looked at me. Jeff looked at me with this look like, "Who are you?"
Yeah, what are you doing?
I don't know. I'd heard it, and so I had it on once in the kitchen while I was doing something.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Dad, are you listening to K-pop again?" I'm like, "I'm just,
I listen to K-pop a lot when I'm cooking dinner. A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes me feel better that it's a dinner cooking thing.
Oh, a lot. Yeah.
But this is your fault. So there are two things to blame you for already this morning. One is my desperate effort to remain relevant with information by using the on this day information, and then of course the K-pop stuff. So the big thing was that Blue Eye Samurai thing. I don't know why I watched it. The people that run the Netflix algorithm clearly know me better than I know me, because I'm like, well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, it's like an 8-part series. Well, I'll give it a shot. I watched the first one and I'm like, oh, I want to know what happens next.
Alrighty.
Just so there I am. I finished, and they're not long or anything, and it took a few days, but I ended up wrapping that up, and it's clearly cliffhanger time. There will be a second season if anything, but
I might have to check that out.
That was yesterday, man. I had a meeting with a super nice woman who has the dream job of dream jobs for me outside of the radio. And that is some big law firm out there. Saw her teaching some trial advocacy stuff. She's a former Denver DA. And they said, you know what? We could use somebody in-house that could train our attorneys how to try cases. And I'm like, wait, what? That's a job?
Wow.
And nobody knows of any other firm that has gone down this road. But she's like, it is the greatest job in the world. And it has provided real, tangible, measurable results. And I'm like, please tell me more. And she's like, well, you know, I do this, I do that. Sometimes they send me to other parts of the country to on a big case where they're getting ready. And I'll spend a few days out there helping them get ready. And I'm like, oh, daddy, I mean, the trial advocate, that's what I miss, is being in the courtroom. I mean, if I can't be in the courtroom, training people to be in the courtroom, I'm a lot like the Oliver Reed character in Gladiator, if you'll remember that. You know what I mean?
That's good. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, where I am.
You know, right now there's a good portion of the audience that is picturing you in leather and a loincloth. I'm just saying, you made the reference, not my
even
fault.
When I picture that, I burp. Like, oh no, don't do that to me. I mean, I go out of my way to shower in the dark. There's just, you know, there's no need to turn on the light. I might wake someone up. You know, I just
scare myself in the mirror. No.
I know where everything is. Exactly. As long as you haven't moved the soap and exchanged it for a knife, I'm good. You know what I mean? Like I can figure it out. But if I can't be in the arena, I'd be happy to be the dude training the folks going into the arena. So we had a nice little sit down in the afternoon and a conversation about that. And of course I did the whole, so do you need an assistant? I mean, do you need somebody who can on a part-time basis after 10 a.m.?
Is there a JV team here that we could get on?
It felt desperate. And I had the Homer Simpson moment in my head where I'm like, don't sound desperate. Don't sound desperate. I'm like, how about me? I don't know. I mean, I feel like I could be really good to you in the firm. And but nonetheless, it was, that was the kind of day. And none of those things happen if I don't have the canceled Zoomy calls.
Nice.
So
Good.
it was a weird day. I couldn't plan for it ahead of time. It just sort of happened, but there it is.
Wow. Mine was Christmas decorations is what I spent most of my time yesterday.
I was going to ask you about that when you do them, because I did do it this week.
Now I didn't do as many as my wife wants, but there were some that we had gotten out of the crawl space that were there. And so what I did is I knew that they were important to her. And especially there are these ones that she bought, kind of like icicle. They're not the icicle lights, but they're really weird. She bought them last year, and it's basically a string of lights, and they hang down, but they're just little wires with LEDs on them, and they're incredibly thin. And they hang down, and it looks like, you know, kind of like snow falling if you do it right. If you time them out right, you've got like 7 different timing settings. Yeah, so it's really cool. However, you remember when you had the lights and you're wrapping them up and you're coiling them up, and they're a big ball of blech the next year? This is that.
Yeah, that's right. Every friggin' time.
Yeah, that's this times 10,000. Because they're just wires with LEDs. How do you possibly wrap them at all without them getting into a giant's hornet's nest? So over the weekend, my wife started working on them. And then there were some obscenities that were said out loud. There were some things questioning the parentage of the individuals.
Only obscenities that count, by the way.
And there were some questions of the parentage and the mental capacity of the people that designed the lights, mentioned by one of the adults in the house.
Yes.
And then she threw them on the floor and was mad. And so I was like, oh, yes, I get it. And she's like, this is just crap. And so she was disappointed, I could tell, that we couldn't get those up. So I spent 2 hours yesterday untangling that ball of nonsense. So I sat there. Yeah, I sat there.
Tell me at least had alcohol in one hand and a remote in the other.
No, well, I did have the remote. I sat there in front and I was just streaming a whole bunch of stuff on soccer. And then I got to watch, some really cool stuff about animals and things, but we can get into that later. In fact,
here we go with the mating ritual of the baboon.
No, actually the largest bats on the planet. They have discovered something recently on how they procreate because it was a mystery, and it's really weird. So yeah, that's part of what I went down. Yeah, the yesterday. So that I did some things on zombie crabs but okay. Anyway, I'm going through and I'm pulling the wires. 2 hours. But I came home and I got it all and I set it up on the front window. And then I went outside and we've got a snowman that we've had for years and a little dog that moves his head back and forth and they're lit up. So I put those out front and I set those up. So she gets home and she's like, oh, you did the decorations. Thank you. And again, this is because she's going back to work after having a week off. And I knew the lights were and so then she comes in and I'm like, hey, got one more thing for you. One more thing for you. She's like, what? So I walk over to the window and I push the button that starts the lights. The lights go, and she goes, you got the lights. I'm like, I know. And she's like, how did you possibly?
Oh, buddy,
yeah, it was one of those things. Yeah, it's one
that
of
moment. That's that very Griswold
Griswold
vacation Christmas moment.
Yeah, this allows me to not put the seat down in the bathroom at least 3 or 4 times and to not pick my towel up off the floor a couple of times. So again, I'm doing indulgences. I'm kind of, I'm building up some good feelings for the stuff I'm going to screw up later. So that was kind of the reason for it. So spent a lot of time doing that yesterday. Got to go get some stuff for the snakes. I'm talking to the guy in Florida. He's teasing me with this breeder with a ridiculous couple of snakes right now that he's willing to cut me a screaming deal on, and it's awful because I feel like an addict.
It's like drugs.
Oh, it is,
man.
It absolutely is.
He's got these blues that are supposed to send you over the moon.
Oh, it is. He's got one, and I thought I was done putting corn snakes into my collection, but he has he's been working on a salmon snow, which is it's a specific morph, but he's been working in perfecting a look that was originally started by Don Soderbergh of SMR. And so he's taken some of the best stock in red factor, mutation genes and created a really interesting look where a lot of people are going for a really bright pink snake and with this mutation gene. But instead what he's done is he's concentrated the pink into the saddles and then split the saddles. He's got this genetic, because again, we can go way down this. So it ends up looking like you have these little jagged pink lines that go all down the back of the snake, and they're gorgeous. It is absolutely stunning. And he's like, hey, and we're talking about another snake, and he's like, I'll throw this one in the shipping for $100. And I'm like, what? I mean, that's a 250.
Buy one snake, get one half off.
That's really what it is. It's a $250 to $300 baby. And he's like, I'll just give it to you for $100. I'm like,
listen, for those like me, of course, who are in rapture over the detailed description of the gene mutation stuff, this block of instruction has been one of those things that you take with you the rest of the day. For everyone else, they have now switched over to diatribe radio.
Yes, they have. Yeah. I mean, the stupid thing is, I could do 20 minutes on snake genetics because they have more genes covering coloring and mutations than we do, and why and what happens with heterozygous. And there's some that are so dominant.
These things in your head. I don't get how you have the room up there for it.
I am as confused as you are. I really am on a daily basis. I
was also alerted with your sharp as a tack brain. I was alerted after you and I talked the first thing this morning, and then I was walking around doing my thing to prepare. I got a little alert from my watch that alerted me that my Peloton thing, my recovery from that is delayed because of my poor sleep. And I'm like, you know what? F you, watch.
Yeah, screw you,
You
Peloton.
know what? Come over here and try to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my God.
There's so much going on. I blame you.
Yes, I do. I was nervous about my next ride, you stupid machine.
Yeah. The lights thing, I have noticed that there are some folks in the hood that I clearly have gone with a professional company because the lines are too perfect.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The colors, there are no lights out. No. There's none of that. Like, I still remember in the day with my dad unscrewing a bunch of bulbs, trying to figure out which is the one that's busted, because it was a complete the circuit kind of electricity moment there, a real lesson.
And you have to work up the stream from the one that's out. Because
that's right.
One earlier,
it could, and you don't know. And so, but those days are gone. Now all these people, I think, have spent, I don't know how much to get those other folks to come out and put up the ladder. So there's no risk of death to you. There's no risk of injury to you. I mean, what's the joy of that? I remember being on the roof, leaning over the eave, trying to figure out a way to clip things in. And
at the same time, you're balancing your center of gravity. You're like, if I go another 6 degrees forward, this is going to go badly. Yeah.
Yeah, or if
absolutely.
you've got it partially strung along the roof line
Yes.
and somehow you lose control of it, and
Yeah.
it dangles down and you're like, I got to pull this whole damn thing up. Hopefully I didn't break anything. Back in the day, it was putting up lights was its own annual challenge. Now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it doesn't seem like the same thing anymore.
Not at all. And we have a huge tree in our front yard. And I used to, when it was smaller, try to wrap the
Yeah.
lights going all the way up. No. This
Yeah.
thing's 20 feet in the air. I can't get all the way up. So it seems kind of like, when you do that, you wrap the lights around the trunk and then you kind of do the circle around the outside of the tree, kind of create that,
Yeah.
that silhouette. Can't do that. I can only get up like, 12, 15 feet. I can't get all the way to the top. So it looks like I get part of it up the tree and then just give up.
I think anybody
well.
that's watched the YouTubes or the Rumbles can see that you're a fully functioning adult male.
Yeah.
And that when you say can't, you mean won't. It's not a matter of ability. It's a will.
That is true. That is very true. I just don't want to go that high up and have to work on that one. I'm trying to figure out right now. I'm trying to figure out what decoration we have in the house where I can start decorating that tree, but then have a string of lights coming down so it looks like the character is pulling the lights out of the tree. I want to do that, but I don't. I don't have a character yet.
Maybe
I can't
it's the
figure
elf
out
on
one.
a shelf.
I don't.
We'll help
yeah,
you
but a little
out.
small though. I need something large you can see. I need something that's 3 to 5 feet that you can see when you're driving down the road. So that's what I'm looking for. So I'm kind of. I don't know. Who knows. Yeah.
Couple quick thoughts on that based on that description.
Yeah.
One, when you talked about the lights getting all tangled up and stuff and the cursing and all that.
Yeah.
My guess is everybody out there has had at least one moment. I have them, it seems like, on a daily basis where I announce out loud to whoever's there or nobody's there.
Oh, yeah.
And it will begin with whoever invented blank should be put to death.
Yes.
Like because whatever the quality control was that it went through before it went to market, that person should be fired and lose their career and their home and their ability to care for themselves. I mean, it's one of those outrageous things.
You want me to break your brain right now?
Uh-oh. Yeah. Again?
Yeah. I'll solve.
Is this going to be more gene mutations with lights or something?
No, I will solve your Christmas light tangling issues in 10 seconds.
But you can't first announce I spent 2 hours untangling them and then say, by the way, I have the solution for yours.
Here's the thing is that's different because those are long wires and this is the idea of, remember, the lights you string across the top of the house or the lights that you string around the tree. Those long string of lights, either large bulbs or small bulbs. There is an easy way to
I think I know where you're going with this.
The next year they're not tangled. Is you take the end where the plug is and you plug it into itself and you create a giant loop and then you wrap them up. You know why? Loops can't tangle unless you unless you bend them in on themselves and you chain a knot
down.
Yeah, but you do a knot, so it's a giant loop and then you just wrap them up normally. Unless you're going to fold it back in on itself and bring it through the circle, it's not going to tangle. It can't. That's what I used to do with my people used to laugh at me when we had headphones that had a cord on them and you had to plug them into your phone. I would take the headphones and you take the other end and I would wrap it together and then just ball it up and put it in my pocket. And people look at me and go, "What are you doing?" Like, well, a loop doesn't tangle. So as long as it's in a loop, you're fine. So you take the ends, you plug them together, you're fine.
I may have to try that this year.
It works. It works.
The other thing somebody told me, and it works with one exception, and that is you just put the end in a box and you just let it fall upon itself as it comes down.
That can work, yeah.
Now that can work if you know to keep the other end on the very top.
Yes.
Because if at any point the next year you reach in and grab it and it's been under any other portion or you've missed something, you have just screwed the pooch.
However, if you plug that end into the top end and you create a loop and then just put it into the box the same way, no tangles.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try that this year.
No tangles. Doesn't tangle.
Once again, we need Billy's segment of, can we produce that? And by I mean, can the producer produce that?
I'll have to see. I'll see what I can do. I will see. It's because
Billy's fact for the day.
I have just a laundry list of stupid stuff in my head.
I know, but we should get it out on the radio. People need to benefit from this. People need to know.
The thing is, you don't need to know about bat sex. That's the thing that I know about now. But the idea of the looping in the Christmas lights, that's useful. The stuff I know about bats and how they're reproducing. No,
Yeah,
fascinating.
okay, well
but no,
let's make
not so
sure we
much fun.
set the parameters. The Billy segment
Yeah.
should be about 9 to 1 actual functioning tips that can help your life.
Oh,
1 out of every 10
Now-
you can make. Did you know about a snake?
now you have severely handicapped me.
No, I didn't. You can blame God for that,
That's
friend.
true. That is true. That is. Oh, that is
Here's
appropriate.
another tip, though, that flows from our conversation
Yeah.
about your tips.
Yeah.
This is from our buddy Alexa. Pro tip: if you've met your medical insurance deductible this year, take your lights down before December 31st.
Yes.
In case
You are the best, Alexa. That is
go to the-
fantastic.
in case you have to go to the ER.
That is a wonderful.
Speaking of that, when do you take your lights down?
Well, technically, we're not supposed to do it until the end of the stock show. That's a Colorado thing, because back in
Which is when?
mid-January. Yeah,
Oh,
mid-January. Yeah. So the idea being that, back in the day, well, first, Colorado was one of the first cities to have outside lights that were accepted. That people were usually doing that. We decorated.
Wait a
their
minute.
house.
Accepted? You mean people that did it before were shunned? Like,
Well, it was like, what are you doing, you weirdo? And it became a thing here in Colorado. Denver's one of the first cities to where the community decided that it's okay for us to decorate outside. Other than that, it was like, you're like, ooh, Jim down the block is outside decorating that tree in front of the house. I wonder if he's been in the vodka again. I mean, that's basically what it was.
and the answer is
yeah,
yes.
yeah. And you're sitting there watching him going, yeah, he's relieving himself in the tree. Yeah,
Isn't that
that's true,
interesting?
yeah. So that was kind of the thing. So Denver was one of the first places to do that, and in part it was because of the stock show, and the idea being because from all these other states that they would visit and journey down here to Denver, and they'd spend over a week here, that it was nice and it was something that the Cowboys used to look forward to come to Denver and be able to drive around and spend time in the city and still have the lights up. It was kind of a tradition that they would look forward to. So ideally in Denver, you don't do it until after the end of the stock show. But
So-
according to people in my neighborhood, I think the date is somewhere in May.
Okay, good.
Possibly.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Because I have, not recently, but I
Yeah.
have in the not too distant past received a letter from the tyrannical folks at the HOA
Oh, I hate them.
that say
I hate them.
your lights must be down by
Yeah.
President's Day.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, wait, what? That's not even 2 whole months
Yeah.
or 3
Not
whole
even.
months of lights.
No. And there is one, it's about a block and a half away from our house that the family leaves. They've got a giant evergreen tree. And one year they had someone come out and put lights into it. And they've just left the lights in there year after year. And then they keep lighting up every year. But, you walk by in July and stuff, you see the lights in there. But I don't care.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
like,
care.
I like
I
leave
don't
it up
care.
there because of that. Now, if you had like, Rudolph and Frosty out in the front lawn, and it's June, maybe not so much. But the idea that you're just going to leave those lights in the tree, I don't care. Yeah.
I one year, this being maybe last year,
Yeah.
Chelsea, formerly of Salem,
Oh, yes.
had come up with a company that wanted to do a little bit of trade action
Oh, yeah.
involving putting lights up on the house. But
Yep.
I didn't end up doing it because I still looked forward to getting out on the roof with the boys, and like staple gunning some
yeah,
of these lights
yeah.
around their windows and stuff. And seeing mom show up and look up in horror as her kids are
Yeah.
running around the
Like,
roof.
what?
This has been going on for years.
Oh,
You
that's
know what I
great.
mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm giving dad the staple gun.
Yeah.
And why are you up there? Why is
your
your screen off your window?
Yes,
And I'm like,
exactly.
well, I didn't want to get out the ladder.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier this way.
So I don't know if we can go back and do that. We'll tell Joel, but maybe we do that did you already put the lights up on the outside of the house? Then you're totally done?
No, I still have the outside lights, and that's always the thing for me right now. I can't find the clips. We've got those plastic clips that go onto the
yeah. And
yeah,
they
on the
break
gutter.
after the first use.
Yes. And so I know that we've got a little box of them, but in the box of all the lights and things yesterday, it wasn't there. So I didn't have time to do that one. So if I can find that little box or just go to the store, because I have to go to the store for a couple other things, I may just pick up another box and do it that way. So I used to do the staple gun until I think it was 4 or 5 years into it. And my wife looks at it and goes,
The environment.
Well, no, she goes, you know how many staples are in the house on that Eve right now? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, it looks stupid. Okay, good point.
Oh, could you see the staples? Because it's
Yeah,
high
tons.
enough up.
Well,
that they're
the thing is,
small.
there
Geez,
were-
you must have had 100 in one place.
I had about 5 or 6 in one area. So, I mean, you could see a cluster. So it's like, okay, fine. And now, we also did siding 2 years ago, and I don't want to put the staples into the siding. So the clips are much easier. So not better, not better. The staples are much better as far as hanging on to it, but the little plastic clips that break after like
Look,
4 months
under
are
the
easier.
caption genius inventions that I
Yeah.
wish I had, those people that invented those clips that break all the time and you're constantly having to buy new ones, they're also the same people that invented those stupid coffee stick stirrers that Starbucks and everyone else jams in your coffee that you just quickly pull out, lick, and then throw in the trash.
Yeah.
They must be trillionaires.
They must.
Over the stupid use of plastics that are killing the planet.
Now I believe that you and I are absolutely creative enough and also obtuse enough to come up with something that we can use that we can have people just use once and throw away. The idea of the stir stick in the coffee. You and I got to figure out that thing to become millionaires because we have enough dumb ideas. There's got to be some sort of a dumb idea.
Aren't we producing the audio version of that?
Yeah, that's a good point. We may have already lost this.
But I want a physical thing.
Yeah,
I do. I want a physical thing.
I do too. Something like that. We can call it the George, whatever it is. It's just I don't know.
Oh my God! Please don't do that. My son's name is George. I don't want him to have to wear that. And my dad doesn't deserve it either.
That's true. That's a good point. Oh, I got the lights over here going blinky blinky.
People are calling?
Yeah, I don't know why.
No, buddy. That's got to be a mistake. Do you want to see who that is? I'll take a look at some of these.
No, not really. No.
Listen,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious, man.
What?
There are a bunch of texts coming in. Surely Billy knows the best way to clean below the DMZ.
Yeah. No, but I could give you a really good hack to avoid going to the dermatologist to get rid of skin tags, which get to be a thing when you get older.
Wait a minute. How do you get rid of skin tags?
It's
not that I have several. I'm just asking.
Now it's really dumb, but it's the easiest thing to do. Wart remover. Put wart remover on for a couple of days.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's when they yell out, what's the price check on wart remover?
Yeah, but I'll just go get
Bill,
some,
and you're like, it's the person behind me.
That should take away the skin tag 9 times out of 10. Yeah, if it doesn't, then go or it starts bleeding, go see the dermatologist for that one because you're attached to a vein or something. But if 9 times out of 10, wart remover, and just don't get the freezy stuff. Don't get the nitrous. Just get the liquid and just.
What about just a sharp blade?
As long as you can, if you can stand the pain, if you don't care about the pain, that's fine.
Well, never mind.
And if you can keep it clean. In fact, I mean, rather than a razor blade, in theory, if they were clean, even your fingernail clippers, the toenail clippers, they'll take it right off. That's easy. But the issue is...
Hold on. I can use the...
Yeah, you can. Big toenail clippers, absolutely you can. Just go clip. But the issue is you have to deal with the sharp cutting of the skin. So it's as if you could stand, pulling out a little bit of your skin and clipping it like that with the toenail clipper, you're fine. But the other thing is going to be an open wound afterwards where you got to keep it clean. Depending on
many of those already.
I don't know where the tags are. I'm not going to ask. I'm just saying I don't know if it's sanitary or unsanitary. So
as a younger man, I would have been concerned about how such scarring might affect my attractiveness to the other gender. At this point, I've given up. So I don't.
You don't know. Embrace the scars. And the reason why is that scars are just tattoos with better stories. Scars are great.
Yeah, but I can remove the tattoos. The scar thing, I don't know.
You've always got a good story. I mean, as long as you're doing something stupid with it. But
it's got to be a fake story.
Much better stories.
Oh, how about this? This was a couple years ago. Somebody I'm talking to, I've known them for years.
Yeah.
I asked them a question. They said, I'll answer that question if you tell me how you got that vicious scar on your neck. And I look at them and I go, that's a wrinkle. Dude.
The wrinkle. Yeah.
It was just so awkward for both of us. Like, holy crap, it looks like
a scar. Yeah.
I'm like, what?
You should have said,
old.
You should have said, that you've seen that movie Roadhouse. Well, I don't like to brag, but I was the character study for Patrick Swayze.
Yeah,
that's what
right.
you need to do. That's
Let's just say I learned a valuable lesson. Don't turn your back on anyone in prison.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly.
And I won't show you the other scar that goes with it.
Yes, or the tattoo.
But I do have a tramp stamp
yes.
that says exit only.
Yes.
There's someone texted in, Billy should have his own YouTube video channel, which includes soccer lessons. What if there was just a channel called Billy?
Oh, no, that would be bad.
You know what I mean? I just feel like, in fact, here's an idea I've had for a long time, Billy, and you would be perfect for this. And I think this will be the future trend. You know how everybody's now, they've got their TikTok and their YouTube and all, and they're all these curated things. I think folks would like to have uncurated. It's almost a combination of what was the Truman. Remember Truman?
Oh, yeah.
Except this is from Truman's vantage point. We get a body cam from Axion, evidence.com or something. and we hook you up to a YouTube channel, and everywhere you go, there it is. Now you have the ability, obviously, to mute it and turn it off when you're, taking care of the little snake or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But otherwise, it's just called Billy, and it's just you going about your day. Maybe it's you. In fact, it could
really
be 2 hours of you untangling things, looking at orangutan lovemaking or whatever it is you're watching on TV. And then it's you at trivia. I mean, this thing could be epic, man. We could be rich.
Tens of people may watch. It would be amazing.
Yeah, but tens of people who will spend tens of dollars. It all adds up. It becomes a billion after.
Yes, it does.
a very short period of time.
Yeah. No, that's a bad idea.
Something else. Oh, people are sending me some political stuff.
Oh, cool.
Here's thank you. Denver Stock Show is usually the third weekend in January. That's very helpful.
Appreciate that.
Here's again Alexa, who seems to have a side hustle of skincare.
Yeah. Hey, all right.
Tea tree oil applied daily for 1 to 2 weeks can remove skin tags.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
Here it is. What minimizes scars? As previously mentioned, and I think what she's saying, I've already told you this, George. Organic, cold pressed, hexane free castor oil. See, I'm not a hexane free people. I mean, guy, I'm like a hexane enslaved castor oil or something.
Pro hexane.
I mean, who doesn't love hexane? Yeah. I'm also a pro gluten guy.
Oh, yeah.
I've asked for extra gluten. Do you know they can't do it? They can give you gluten-free food. They can't give you extra gluten.
No, I think the gluten makes it delicious. I've tasted that gluten-free bread. That's awful.
And every time I'm with someone and they say, I want gluten-free blank, I'll be like, I'll have their gluten. And I just get the stares back. They want to smile, but they're not sure if it's a thing because nobody even knows what gluten is.
No idea.
No, nobody knows.
No, it's like search. It's like when search said, yes, here's the new search now with Retsin. Nobody knew what a Retsin was.
What the hell's Retsin?
No one knows. Yeah.
It's resin with a T in it.
Exactly.
Is it sticky? By the way, our conversation is generating, and this happens on a daily basis. Some side thing. Here's now our friend Joan.
Hey, Joan.
Thread floss around the skin tag.
Oh, that could do too. Yeah. Yeah.
This has now become how to remove your skin tag on 710 KNUS.
I know. But it's a great, wonderful life hack. It's easy to do. Don't go to the dermatologist. It's an easy thing. Just depends on what your level of pain tolerance is.
I love our listeners because they want to help. Here's another somebody, and thank God they highlighted this. They sent a picture of one of those big paper binder clips, and I thought, oh my God, are they going to say put this on the skin tag? No, it says the best thing for your lights. So there again, very thoughtful, but smart.
Also, here's a tip: if you're making something on the stove, and you have to have a thermometer in it. We used to do this when the girls are making a lot of candy, and we've got a candy thermometer, but it also works well with a regular thermometer. Yeah. Get one of those binder clips, put it on the edge of the pot, and then the clip top that has kind of a little hoop on it, that will bend that over, and that will hold the thermometer inside of the liquid without letting it touch the bottom. It's a great
Why am
hack.
I holding it inside the liquid?
No, because you got to know what temperature it is. I mean, there are things like my girls have made glass candy and other stuff, and there are certain times in which you want to, like if you're doing oil, if you're going to fry something, you got to bring the oil up to a certain temperature, and you got to have the thermometer in there. The easiest way, rather than just dipping it in and out or just leaning it against, because if you let the thermometer touch the side of the pot, it's going to...
You're not getting a true read,
So in order to make it hang in there, it's that binder clip. Yeah.
And your girls, I was thinking about the thermometer you have kids put under their tongues back in the day.
Oh, yeah. That
now it's that ear. That's the other thing people miss out on. Now it's the ear thing or the ridiculous forehead thing. Or even now you go to the doctor and they shoot you with a laser in your forehead.
Yeah. We've got one of those at home. I've got the laser forehead thing at home.
Does it work? Is it accurate?
Yeah, it's pretty good. In fact, okay. Little bit of a confession here as far as why we got that. Wait, let's see what time it is. Okay, I know my wife's not listening. Okay, because this is a secret.
Okay, good.
I told her, hey, this is great. I got this laser thing, so now the kids, we don't have to put the thing in the ear and everything else. She's like, this is wonderful, and she loves it now because she can go around and she can check people's temperatures and well, at least 70% of the reason that I got it is because it also allows me to use the laser to check the ambient temperature in the steak enclosures. Yeah, that's really the reason I got it, is because I could go boop and I could check around the enclosure with a little laser and I could get the ambient temperature. That's the reason we have that thermometer, not because the children, they can get sick. That we had other ways to judge their temperature.
You can't package it that way.
No. Oh God, no. That would be awful. So yeah, that's why I'm sharing this with you. This is a thing that I know that my wife's not listening right now, but that's really the reason that we have it, is because of the snakes. But she thinks I've done this wonderful thing that I'm concerned about the kids' health, and
Speaking
that's
of-
nice. We'll let her
Speaking
think
of
that.
who's not listening, somebody texted in
Yeah.
and said the 6 always feels like it's just the 3 of us talking.
It should. That's exactly it. Oh God, look at
That's
the
great.
time. We got to go. Holy crap. We're
Yeah,
in
and
so
I
much
was going
trouble.
to talk about the fact that you no longer hear
Yeah.
anyone say, "Well, get out the rectal thermometer." Nobody ever says that anymore.
I was going to say that is an uncomfortable thing because
It's
early in my
not.
life.
I mean, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes,
and
you're right.
it's the idea of relax and hold still. No. Do you understand where this is going?
Yeah.
Why do you say relax?
Listen,
This is the
and you
most
can't-
awkward thing we've done.
If you offer
Yes.
to do that at the doctor's office, it just
Yeah.
weirds everyone else out. Like
It
if you say,
is.
"Don't we do the rectal thermometer
know.
anymore?" They just kind of do that half laugh, like, "I hope you're joking," and then they
Well-
walk out and clearly talk to the rest of the staff
I-
like that dude's a freak.
Well, I the other time I had to find a new doctor because at one time I came in and I said, "Hey, I'm all ready," and I already had the thermometer inserted, and he was like,
no.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
He said, "You can't get-" He said, "Billy,
I'm kidding.
one, I can get
Yeah.
that out, but two, that is
Exactly.
not a thermometer."
Yeah,
That
exactly.
is-
How many thermometers do you have? This is awful.
It's this
I
thermometer
gotta take
slash
my headphones off
cucumber.
before
What
it
are you
makes this
doing? Yeah,
even
we
worse.
can't do that.
Yes.
Listen, at this point, we are going to completely devolve. We've blown the doors off of whatever our past record was. I'm screwing us on the Thorpe Report, and you choose the news, which we're going to do next. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Little Pearl Jam right here on 710 KNUS. Let's turn it over to the big man to get caught up on some of the uplifting news of the day. It's the Thorpe Report with Billy.
Yes, nothing but happiness and smiles. Continued sunny skies again today, slightly warmer temperatures. Little change for Wednesday, sunshine and temperature staying a
Good
bit above
start.
normal. Yeah, then it get a little bit colder later on Friday. Could get flurries on 37 degrees by Friday, but we'll see. That is days away, and we don't know what the voodoo people think.
No one knows.
No idea. A man was shot and injured by Denver police after attempting to make contact with him on Monday afternoon.
Funny. It's just like, geez.
It is just always here's the crimey stuff.
Every day, man.
Yeah,
every day.
The shooting happened in the parking lot of an apartment complex, 800 block of South Oneida Street. Denver police chief was on the scene following the shooting, said they first noticed the man because loud music was coming from inside of his truck. He was throwing items from inside the truck into a nearby dumpster. While he was doing this, he had a handgun in his waistband. Police then engaged him, asking him, hey, why the gun? And they negotiated with him for several minutes. He refused to follow commands, wouldn't do anything the officers asked him to. And evidently they shot him. So 2 Denver police officers fired the weapon at the man.
Evidently, they shot him.
Yeah, see, the interesting thing is I'm curious about this one. Police say the man did not fire at the officers, but I'm curious as far as how or if he was brandishing the gun. We got to find out more about that one. But
I wonder if he makes some sort of and you'll see this term a lot, furtive gesture.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's what we're looking at. A woman who admitted to beating her 8-year-old great-nephew to death with a wooden back scrubber is going to spend 36 years in prison. Well, at least she was sentenced. She's not going to spend 36 years.
No.
Denver District Court, 63-year-old Susan Balfour, also sentenced to 5 years of mandatory probation. Elsewhere,
it has to be parole.
Yeah.
36 years, by the way. 18.
Yeah, what does it look like?
My hope is she'll be mid-80s, a little less than mid-80s. Hopefully she dies in prison.
Yeah. It took just over 24 hours this weekend. This is awful for the Denver Police Department to respond to 4 calls of people who died outside.
Good Lord.
It's a series of overdoses from Union Station to Broadway. Started Saturday around 4:44 in the afternoon, and they responded to what they called an outdoor death investigation. Over the next 24 hours and 23 minutes, they investigated 3 more outdoor deaths. This is the problem. This is what's really sad about the story. 4 outdoor deaths in one day seem like a lot, but according to the DPD, this is pretty normal. They say every weekend is pretty similar. Yeah. They say we're losing 3 or 4 people to overdoses every weekend.
This is why they advocate for the safe injection site, not near your home.
Exactly. A lawsuit filed by a woman who was tased by a Pueblo police officer says the officer should not be able to maintain his police officer certification. This is according to the lawsuit. After an internal affairs investigation, they found the officer violated several department policies when he used the taser in 3 cases in 2022. He was reprimanded, but still kept his job, so she's suing to take it away from him. Aurora police officer Nathan Woodyard is back on duty after the acquittal in the Elijah McClain case. No other information available on that one. President Joe Biden is coming to Colorado this week after postponing his trip last month due to the Hamas-Israel conflict.
Thank God.
Yeah, he's going to be here and visit the CS Wind plant Wednesday in Pueblo, and he's here today. He's going to travel to Pueblo to visit CS Wind. It's the largest wind tower manufacturer in the world. He'll again deliver remarks and stuff like that. Also, Republican leaders, we talked about this off the air, Republican leaders are calling for a prosecutor to enforce obscenity laws to remove hundreds of books from schools in Colorado Springs. The conservative advocacy group Take Back District 20 called the inclusion of the books in the school libraries a clear criminal activity. Now they have a petition that they delivered to Republican 4th Judicial District Attorney Michael Allen, friend of the show, and signed by Republican state representatives Scott Bottoms, Ken DeGraff, former Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl, Pastor Jeff Anderson, who leads faith outreach for congressional Congressman Doug Lamborn. A bunch of other people have endorsed it. El Paso County chapter of Moms for Liberty, El Paso County Republican Party, Parent Advocacy Network, all endorsed it. So I'll have to see. I just, the thing for me is that I don't know why I want to take the books being the danger thing. I don't know.
I'd want to know more about the books. You and I talked about in the story that we read says that a friend of the show and friend of mine, Rose Pugliese, she's the assistant minority leader in the House, that she signed on to it, but also provided a separate letter saying, I'm not looking for prosecution. I'm looking for a conversation here about what are we doing and how do we improve it?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to see if I can get in. We had Ken on the show last week or so. We can see if we can get DeGraff or Rose on. I'd love to have that conversation because gut check here, just my gut reaction to any prosecution on obscenities laws is loser.
Yeah.
Because the First Amendment, this statute has not been well tested yet, in my opinion, on the First Amendment grounds. And it's that whole I know porn when I see it. Like I can't define
Yeah.
it, but I know when I see it. Obscenity falls in that area. It's super tough to prosecute. And starting there, that's hard. Maybe we have a conversation
Yeah.
about that later today. That's just a tough place to begin
Yeah.
to go when you realize
It's-
that your school libraries are putting books out there you don't want the kids to have access
It's
to.
hard for
That's
me.
tough.
It's hard for me because I was told, and I forgot who the famous person is that said it, but I was told at a very early age, as soon as someone tells you not to read the book, that is the very next book you need to read. Because why? Why are they telling you not to? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is
Billy, don't read the Bible.
Yeah, that's the part for me. I've done that. I've gone through that one. Alrighty. And finally, quarterback Shadir Sanders missed our season finale, Utah on Saturday due to a fracture in his back. They hadn't made that public until yesterday. So that's all I got, my friend.
You can't get sacked 100 times in a season and not come away with
No, not
something
at all.
bad. Listen,
Yeah.
we've got to cut away for a break. We are going to work like heck to get the You Choose the News. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Hi-ho, this is Broad here on 710 KNUS. It's time for You Choose the News.
You do that so well. Yes, sir. It is that time to fool you yet again, where we play everybody's favorite fake radio news game show, You Choose the News. We have scoured the interwebs for mere moments this morning to find stupid stories, giving them even more ridiculous headlines to play this fake radio news game because they keep paying us to. It's nice. We can actually go to McDonald's. Alrighty, sir. Here we go.
Wow.
Headline number 1. It's almost like he knew something about it. Headline number 2. Spontaneous skydive. Headline number 3. Obviously, Jesus hates the hippies. And headline number 4. Keep the important stuff around your neck. Headlines yet again are it's almost
Hold
like
on. Clearly, Jesus hates the hippies. Let's
obviously,
do
that is obvious. In fact, we're going to Pastor John Wilkerson. He is of First Baptist Church of Hammond in Indiana. He recently posted on Instagram that he had to apologize for a creation seminar hosted at First Baptist Church recently. He's apologizing to the congregation because of the filthy hippie that was there, that was talking to him. Yes, one of the people involved was an 18-year-old Indiana-based Creation Evidence Expo person who has long hair. And members of the congregation objected to the fact that he had long hair and was there talking to them about the Bible. They also were pretty certain that he was not a Baptist. They honestly think he was a Methodist. Oh, how could they do that? And they don't think he was using the proper translation of the Bible. So yes, how could you have a dirty hippie and a Methodist come to the church? That would be horrible.
Yeah, I've seen Jesus Christ Superstar. He looks like a dirty hippie.
He kind of does. I don't know.
Get it.
All right, it's almost like he knew something about it. Spontaneous skydive or keep the important stuff around your neck.
Spontaneous skydive.
Spontaneous skydive is not something you normally want to do, but recently a co-star of Outback Wrangler did take a spontaneous skydive and ended like you think it would. The Australian crocodile egg hunter was killed after the helicopter he was dangling from ran out of fuel mid-flight. During the time he was dangling 100 feet underneath the helicopter when disaster struck, it ran out of fuel. His co-star, Matt Wright, decided, well, I'm going to save my buddy. And he cut the line. not
No.
understanding that the line, he was too high up in the air, so he actually killed his friend because the guy fell too far.
No,
Yeah, it was
wait.
not a survivable height. He dropped him and then crashed the helicopter, and now he's facing charges. Yeah, I know.
I don't
So many
understand.
questions. Yeah, final
can't-
choice.
yeah.
I know. Almost like he knew something, or keep the important stuff around your neck.
Keep the important stuff. around your neck.
Kansas City, we are taking the new Simplicity bag. Amber Waldeer got tired of not being able to carry many things on to the plane, and so now she has started her own company called Simplicity, and she has neck pillows that are actually supersized, and you can put all of your clothes inside of them. She said recently she was traveling, and she had 3 pairs of leggings, 5 shirts, 6 socks, all in this one bag that you can get through the baggage check and just carry it onto the plane. So you don't have to do the overhead compartment or anything. Yeah. So it looks like a neck pillow. If you put your clothes in there, then it's soft and you can use it on the plane as you're sleeping. It's a suggestion for you, sir. I'm trying to help you out. All righty. That's all we got.
Thank you, buddy. How many seconds do we have left, my man?
20 as of now. 19.
Well, listen, here's the good news, folks. Chris Murray, super lawyer, going to weigh in on this case about Donald Trump on the ballot. He's playing an active role. We'll talk with him next. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Welcome back to hour 2 of 4 on the George Show right here on 710 KOS. It's the Tuesday edition. We get a little Charlie Kirk at 10, a little Dennis Prager at 11, a little healthy dose of Seb Gorka from 1 to 3, and then we go live and local. Not sure today if it's Jimmy or Jeff from 3 to 4, and then we go with Officer Brandon Tatum from 4 to 7. Happy to bring up on the VIP line friend of the show, friend of mine, wicked smart, super lawyer type guy who just knows things constitutional. And I wanted to have him on to talk about the Donald Trump ballot access case that just got resolved, last week or so. His name is Chris Murray. Sir, thanks for joining us.
Hey, George, nice to be with you this morning. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for making time. I know you got a billion things going on, including a special filing today. What are you doing?
So we've on this one, I and my firm have been retained to represent the 3 national Republican committees, so the NRSC, the NRCC, and the RNC, to file an amicus brief in support of President Trump and the Supreme Court's consideration of this ballot access case.
Okay, now that's a big deal. This is one that we had texted about back in the day when it was going on. And I wanted to have you come on to talk about it because it is a ridiculously long opinion. It's like 102 pages from Judge Wallace, who, if folks don't remember, was newly appointed to the bench. I think she was newly appointed, back in October, November of last year, about a year ago. But she took the bench in January of this year, got this case. I wrote a column about it. There are just some decisions that she made in that interim period between appointment and taking the oath that I just think allow people to question some bias stuff. But aside from that, she issues this lengthy 102-page opinion on this. You've read it all. My guess is at least once.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like 5 times, but it was at least 1.5 times.
What are your takeaways, man? What happened here? And then I'll talk to you about why you think it happened and what the implications are for the future for the president.
Well, I mean, so what happened here? I think that the big picture thing is what happened here, and candidly, in my mind, what shouldn't have happened here. What did Judge Wallace eventually do? Let me start out by giving her credit. I think she got the ultimate legal answer here right, which is, as I think we talked about on your show a couple months ago, I said, hey, look, I'm not sure that Section 3, right, applies to the President of the United States or former presidents. And I think I also said, I'm just not sure that states have the ability to enforce this because Congress hasn't passed the law to let them do it. And that's what she concluded. She concluded, hey, look, this doesn't apply to the president. And so, this action to try and disqualify him from the ballot under the 14th Amendment can't prevail because Section 3 of the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to him. Right. So congratulations to the judge for getting that correct. And by the way, I mean that. I mean, that was the right decision. However,
also, by the way, as long as we're going to give her credit, though, Chris, the other thing is the 95 pages that lead up to that revelation are also well thought out, well documented. I just don't know if they were necessary. We'll get to that down the road. But it's not that this was just slapped together. I mean, this was thoughtful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually what I was about to say, George. As I said, the about 94, 95 pages leading up to that conclusion, where she at length concludes that President Trump engaged in insurrection within the meaning of the 14th Amendment. Candidly, that's in the legal world, this, you're a lawyer, right? That's what a lot of people would call dicta, right? That's where a judge issues their opinion on something that they don't have the authority to issue an opinion on. And what I think Judge Wallace ought to have done is granted President Trump's motion to dismiss, which his lawyer, Scott Gessler, filed early in the case, where he argued, hey, look, this doesn't apply to the president, so we don't need to have a trial. We don't need to go through all the work of all of this, because whatever you think of what went on here, it doesn't legally matter. Judge Wallace, for whatever reason, felt compelled to make her findings of fact, and then say, but never mind, they don't matter legally.
Yeah, interesting. Why are you weighing in then? If she gets the ultimate case, if she gets the ultimate outcome right, why is Gessler and his team appealing? And why are you, on behalf of all these other giant Republican organizations, weighing in with an amicus?
Well, I mean, I can't speak, obviously to any, inside baseball on why Scott and the president's team are appealing, but I would imagine that they're appealing for the reason that they say they are, which is, look, this legal finding that the court has made, right, is dicta, right, and it should be struck. That the Supreme Court should clarify that the court had no authority to make that finding. They're also appealing, saying that, look, the facts aren't there to support it, and I understand that. But the reason why the national Republican committees are chiming in is because, look, there's been a lot of these suits all over the country. Colorado is just one of them. And the National Republican Party has got an interest in, one, making sure courts understand how the 14th Amendment and Section 3 works, and also that courts understand that whatever they think about the 14th Amendment and Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that trying to clear the field of a Republican primary candidate before Republican primary voters have had a chance to consider them and before the Republican National Convention has met jeopardizes the constitutional rights of the national party to choose its own nominee. And the national parties want to remind courts that in the end of the day, under a long string of case law, the national party is free to nominate whoever the national party wants to nominate. And even if the 14th Amendment applies, right, which it doesn't to the President of the United States, I want to be clear on that. But even if the 14th Amendment were to apply, it doesn't apply to somebody until they hold the office of the presidency. It doesn't apply to somebody who's trying to hold the office of the presidency.
Even if they had
that's
been,
where President
even
Trump
if they
is now.
were
He's
the,
a candidate.
but Chris, what about the idea that he was the president at the time that this thing happened?
Absolutely. And if he was president at the time this happened, and let's say and by the way, he was, right? I mean, so let's say the 14th Amendment applies because he was president at the time this happened, right? So the 14th Amendment, all it operates to do, if you read it, is to bar someone from holding the office of the presidency, if it applies to the presidency, right? All the other offices it applies to, all it does is bar you from holding the office. The amendment could have said it also bars you from seeking the office, running for the office, talking about the office, but it doesn't say that. It bars you from holding it.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate then. So what you're saying is can't stop the guy from running for office, but once elected, it might keep him from taking the oath and assuming the office?
Well, I mean, if it applied to presidents, sure. Yeah, it could. I mean, but here, I mean, and by the way, just so you know, that's George, that's not some kind of crazy town opinion. A lot of state laws, right, including around electors for the office of elector for president of the United States, and dealing with eligibility for state legislature for state offices. And by the way, even here in Colorado, right, we've got laws that talk about eligibility for office, right? And there's different mechanisms to try and challenge somebody to keep them from running, right, which are very narrow and circumscribed, and much broader mechanisms to try and keep somebody from assuming the office if they're ineligible for the office. And what happens if somebody gets elected who is ineligible for the office, like in the case of a presidential elector, right? They get elected, and then they say, I'm not voting for that candidate for president. What happens? They become ineligible, they're stripped of their office, and they're replaced.
Interesting. We had a couple text in and say, I don't understand why the 14th Section 3 doesn't apply to presidents. And I want to hear your take on this. For me, it defies common sense that the people that drafted the 14th Amendment, which took place, as you know, after the Civil War, they know about the office of the president. They know what it means. It's been in existence for almost 100 years at that point. Well, maybe less than that, but they don't ever say president of the United States. They list all of these other things, very detailed, and yet we're supposed to conclude that the phrase officer of the United States is going to encompass the president. And you have an answer for why even that doesn't apply, let alone the lack of logic in how they did it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about So it says officer of the United States. And remember, it talks about a particular kind of officer of the United States. An officer of the United States who has taken an oath. So, sorry, it talks about members of Congress, members of state legislatures, and anyone who has taken an oath to support the Constitution. Okay, well, hey, most people would say, there we go. Doesn't the president take an oath to support the Constitution? We all watch Inauguration Day, right? I mean, we know what the president says. Well, I would say, do you? Because an oath to support the Constitution, that is the oath from Article 6 of the Constitution. Article 6 of the Constitution requires an oath of senators and representatives, members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states. That's Article 6. They have to take an oath to support this Constitution. That's a quote straight from Article 6 of the Constitution. There's always been a law in the books from Congress requiring that oath. Okay,
but you're saying 6 doesn't apply to Article 2.
Well, because there's a different oath in Article 2, isn't there, George? Right?
There's a specific oath in there. Every word's in there.
That's exactly right. And let me read it to you. Here's the president's oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States, and here's the important part, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't say support anywhere in there. And I think
does the word support appear in that Article 6 one?
It sure does. Absolutely. They have to take an oath.
So interesting. What's the difference? Why would they choose that word?
Well, I mean, there's, frankly, that's where I'll say there is a lot of fair debate, right? But you might say that, look, subordinate officers of the United States, subordinate officials of the United States have to support the Constitution, right? The head of the executive branch has to do something a little bit different, right? He has to, like when it says protect and defend the Constitution, preserve, protect, and defend. What does that sound like, right? Protect the thing from sort of outside, right? And potentially domestic enemies, right? Keep it from being, right, ripped apart by others. And whereas everybody else has to say, I won't be one of the people doing the ripping up, okay? Is that a good idea? Should the president maybe have to say he will support the Constitution? Yeah, maybe. But I'm just saying that, to me, you pointed out that the drafters of the 14th Amendment listed out all these other officials really specifically. They never mentioned the president. And then they talk about all of these officials who have previously taken an oath to support the Constitution. Don't you think they knew what they were doing, that the president doesn't have that in his oath?
I do think they knew what they were doing. Here's a texter. Oh, come on. How long did it take for him to come up with that excuse? I don't think it's an excuse. And I think you could argue, hey, President Trump did not preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution based on whatever happened. You could argue that, but that's not the point.
Absolutely.
The point is that our Amendment 4, the 14th Amendment, doesn't say violated the Article 2 oath. It, in essence, is saying you've violated or you haven't fulfilled your Article 6 oath.
Correct. And by the way, you could make that argument, right? That, well, shoot, what happened on January 6th was President Trump preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. I think there is certainly an argument that you could say that is not what he was doing at all, right? But I think that the folks who drafted the 14th Amendment and who drafted the Constitution would say, yeah, and there's a remedy for that. It's impeachment, right? And by the way, the Congress did that. Right, the Congress actually impeached President Trump a second time, and the Senate acquitted him. That's the Senate's call.
And had he been impeached, by the way, and the impeachment turned into a conviction, he could not.
He would have been disqualified from office for the rest of his life. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's where the sanction comes from.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So what else are you out there
that's sort of the heart of that
against?
Argument.
Yeah,
I apologize for speaking over you, George. Yeah, that's sort of the heart of that argument, is that even if you think it maybe ought to apply, it would be a good idea. I think the founders, and even more importantly, the drafters of the 14th Amendment, who I think considered probably, hey, do we go a different direction here than the founders or not? I think they decided, nah, we're going to follow the founders' lead. the president is unique. And if you want to bar a president from office for the rest of his life, the Senate has got to do it in an impeachment trial.
That is fascinating. We're talking with Christopher Murray. He is a super lawyer who is engaged in these struggles. I think there are going to be some out there who listen to the show who are like, well, this guy's just all Trump all day long. He'll come up with any excuse possible. That's not true.
No, I mean, so for a long time, I had the privilege of being the counsel for the state Republican Party. And so in that role, I had to be really careful to sort of like just not share any of my personal political views, because nobody elected me to anything. And I was sort of a vendor of the state party. You have to be pretty neutral. But I'll say, like, in my personal politics, anybody who knows me knows that I'm actually not a fan of President Trump at all. But I got to tell you, I think he deserves the chance to be on the primary ballot. And if he wins the Republican nomination, he deserves the ability to run for president. Elections ought to be decided at the ballot box. They ought not be decided in courtrooms, even if you don't like the person who's running.
And Chris, the other part of this, and this is why you do what you do in part two, is there are too many people that play the short game. And that is, what is the problem we're trying to solve at this moment? Does this solve it? They never look down the road at the broader implications and say, if this can happen here, where will it happen again on something else that we may not be happy with? You got to fight for the law and the principles when you can, where you can.
Well, and this is where I have just profound disagreement with the plaintiffs in this case, particularly the Republican plaintiffs in this case. Look, like, I think folks, everybody's had a candidate that they like or don't like, or especially that they don't like, win an election in their own party, right? It's happened to me. It's happened to lots of other Republicans, right? I'm sure it's happened to Democrats too, but we're not talking about them, right? So what, right? That's part of being in a party, is that, hey, somebody, you have to realize, like, you could be wrong, right? I mean, I'm perfectly willing to admit that. I mean, I've got my views about, President Trump, things I like about him, things I don't. On balance, I guess I don't like him so much, but shoot, I could be wrong. And I'll tell you what, for the folks who have consistently been making the case to me over the years, really since 2016, that, hey, this guy's better than anything that the Democrats could put up. I'll tell you what, the last 2 years have begun to bear them out.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Let me ask you then, I'm sure you haven't had this sort of off the bench kind of a conversation with Judge Wallace, but why in the world do you think she spent 95 pages detailing whether or not there was an insurrection and whether or not Trump engaged in it, if she could have taken the very last 8 pages and ended it right there and said, thanks for all this? I mean, wasn't there even a motion to dismiss on that issue you talked about before?
Yeah. I mean, there was, and I think really, like, given what she ruled here, as she was writing her opinion, she should have. I mean, in my mind, again, this is easy for me to say. I'm not sitting on the bench wearing a robe, okay? But in my mind, she should have stopped and said, "You want to know what? I'm reconsidering my denial of the motion to dismiss. I'm granting it." Right. End of story. But I think, if you ask me to sort of in a judicial realist way, right, to say, why spend all this time making these detailed factual findings? And there's no question.
Yeah. Why?
I think it's basically, she knew this was going to go to the Colorado Supreme Court. And what did she not want? On the chance the Colorado Supreme Court disagrees with her, right, and says the 14th Amendment actually does apply to the president and former presidents. Well, what would happen if she granted a motion to dismiss and the Supreme Court disagreed? The Supreme Court would slap her wrist and say, Judge Wallace, you're wrong, and now we're sending this back down for a trial, right? So she would get the whole thing back, and she'd be publicly chastened by the Supreme Court, right, and have to have this trial there. And I think she probably said, look, I want this 3-ring circus in my courtroom exactly once, and so we're going to have a trial. I'm going to find the facts, and if the Supreme Court decides they disagree with me, then they can look at my factual findings, so they'll know what they need to do, right, which is disqualify him. But I think that she decided she didn't have the authority to do that, but she probably would be, if the Supreme Court decides that, hey, actually you did, well, that's their call. And I think that's why I make those factual findings, is to give the Supreme Court sort of a neat and tidy package
So-
if they decide to do something different.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's the ice maker in the kitchen. But what you're saying is this precludes her from having to really do any other heavy lifting on this. She's made all the findings in advance. They get to make a decision, and then bing, bang, boom, it's over.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, to the extent, like, heavy lifting in terms of work, she's done it, right? She doesn't have to do it again. Heavy lifting, politically, to the extent you can think about that when it comes to a court, yeah, she's sort of free of that because she made the factual findings, but she didn't, make the finding that, hey, to be the first judge in the country to say Trump is disqualified from the ballot. So I think she made those findings so that no matter what happens, there's no way that this comes back to her courtroom.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What's the timing look like on this, man, from this point? You guys file your thing today. I presume it's 1 or 2 pages.
It's a few longer than that. I mean, George, the old lawyer's maxim, right? Why do in 2 pages what you can do in 20?
Well, you don't get a bill more on brevity. That's for sure.
No, that's also true. But I'll say that amicus briefs are due today at noon by anybody who wants to file one on either side. And then there is oral argument set December 6th. In front of the full Supreme Court.
Oh, dang, that's next week. So this is kind of on a rocket docket. You are not asking for oral argument.
No. I mean, it may be that if the Supreme Court, sometimes in very rare cases, they'll ask to hear from amicus parties. But there's enough folks who need to speak there. And, frankly, the real parties in interest, including the president, the Colorado Republican Party, and the Secretary of State ought to be doing most of the talking.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Is Jenna Griswold being represented by Phil?
She is. The Attorney General still represents the Secretary of State.
Let me just ask this. Was it weird at all, or at least a discussion topic legitimately, that the judge who was sitting on this case, who doesn't sort of sua sponte recuse herself, instead is sitting in a case where there is a table at which the Secretary of State and Attorney General are sitting, where she had given each of them money for their campaigns for election and re-election?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that is a fair question. I guess I'll say to your listeners, look, a lot of judges. I mean, so first thing, being a judge doesn't mean that you have to forever eschew politics. Now, I think it's a better course to do that, right? The judge I clerked for example, doesn't make political contributions, period, right? And I think that is the better course. However, before they become judges, and I think that's the context in which Judge Wallace gave to Jenna Griswold and Phil Weiser. Shoot, I mean, a lot of judges, to get that job, a lot of them tend to be interested in politics. They tend to be politically connected. And so I think if every judge who gave to somebody who holds, especially these statewide officials who are in their courtroom in one capacity or another, especially in Denver District Court all the time, I think you'd have, a significant chunk of the bench recusing itself. Now, would it have been perfectly fine for her to recuse? Yes, but I guess I got to admit, on this one, and maybe I'm being too nice here, but I just don't. I don't really see a huge issue there.
Let me just add an extra fact, like we do in the whole law school exam thing.
Mm-hmm.
These contributions took place the first time when she gave to Phil and Jenna. She gave after she had made it to the governor's desk as one of 3 potentially hitting the bench. This wasn't just some sort of past political activity that took place before she ever applied. She'd already made it to his desk. She didn't get picked. The second contribution, or the third contribution, that I thought was problematic was one where she wrote a check, albeit just a mere $100, but she wrote $100 to an organization that stood for the proposition that January 6th was an insurrection, and this organization existed to defeat Republicans on the ballot, especially at the congressional level. She wrote that check after she'd been appointed to the current position she held, but before she took the oath. That's just a different level of misjudgment in my point. Like, in my opinion, what you're saying makes total sense to me. There are people that aren't just walking around saying, hey, I want to be a judge, and people go, oh, you're the best. It's not like that. You are politically active. I believe that's true. But the timing of this was kooky.
Yeah, I mean, like, so again, do I think it's a great look? And by the way, that actually is the contribution that I think is the most troubling, right? The last one that you just mentioned. Do I think it's a great look? No, I don't, right? But yeah, I guess I've been doing, like, I litigate, I mean, you know this, I litigate politically controversial cases, and like literally like expressly political cases all over the country.
Yep.
I've been in front of judges who used to be partisan Democrats, judges who used to be partisan Republicans. A couple of the best rulings I've ever received in massively political cases, including a 14th Amendment case for Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, came from judges, right, who in their writings, in their previous political contributions, are as liberal as the day is long. They called the balls and strikes, right? So, you know, my tendency until Judge Wallace has been on the bench for a little bit longer is to say, I'm going to trust her to call the balls and strikes. If there's a bias there, right? Well, one day maybe this case becomes a data point that shows us that. But she's only been on the bench for a year. You know, let's sort of see how it goes. Most of these folks take their oath seriously over time.
I don't doubt that she does. It was never that. Even the column I wrote, it was much more of, you have now created the argument for the other side. If the other side wants to attack your opinion, you've given it to them, and it's like, why do that?
And there is no question that that's correct, right? Like, that in today's day and age, why make it easy for somebody, right, who doesn't want to like what you're going to do, right, to say that there's an underhanded motive? I agree with that.
Chris Murray, wicked smart. Good luck with your opinion. I hope, or your amicus. My hope is that you spell check it before you submit it. If you need help with that, I can show you where to do that in Word. Buddy, good luck. We'll have you back on to talk about how it all turns out.
George, it's always a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Hey, that's Chris Murray, super lawyer, talking about that 14th Amendment case involving President Trump and whether or not he's going to remain on the ballot here, at least in Colorado. It's going to have potentially national implications, as I expect that case to go all the way to SCOTUS. Listen, we're going to cut away for a break, a little bit overdue, but I love me talking to Chris. Let me just say real quickly here, I want to advise you, our good friends at Ultra Botanica. You just don't know it by that name. You know it by Ultra Cur. That's C-U with the little umlaut above it, R. They're the patented all-natural curcumin-based antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. Billy and I took this thing, and I'm telling you, it's worth the try. 3-day free supply. All you've got to do is go to your natural grocers, go to the vitamin manager, have to go to the vitamin manager, go to the natural grocers, get that 3-day supply. Half of everybody that takes this thing experiences relief within 48 hours, and half of that group within 2. It costs you nothing. It's all natural, patented. It's safe. Give it a shot. See if it works for you. You can find out more at getultranow.com. That's getultranow.com. Hey, it's George Brauchler. I'll be back with you here. Your calls after this, 303-696-1971. Some text coming in too. Should President Trump be on? Were you convinced by Chris? Is that what you think the right answer is? George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Just a small town girl right here on 710 Kane West. George Brauchler back with you. My thanks to Chris Murray, super smart lawyer, super lawyer guy who came on to explain at least his and his client's role in trying to see that Donald Trump remain eligible for president on the ballot here in Colorado. But I think he made it clear this is not about Donald Trump. This is about the broader conversation about whether the 14th Amendment, and specifically Section 3 of it, is applicable to the president. And, there are just some folks out there that are texting in and calling and have the conversation. They're just not convinced. And, Billy asked the question off the air. Billy, I don't want to talk for you. Why don't you say your piece on this and let's talk about it.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking at, and I understand where Chris is coming from, is I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea that when putting together the 14th Amendment, the idea of not putting support the Constitution is some sort of a linchpin. I understand why legally we are trying to split hairs, in my opinion, on that one. But I have a hard time wrapping my head around the idea that the people putting that forward were excusing the president from that umbrella, that they were going to cover all the other officers of the United States, but the one person they were excusing is that guy, which, in my opinion, they could have written that exemption out. I understand the idea that if they said it should have applied, blah, 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 they should have written that in. But I would argue that if they meant him to be exempt under the umbrella of officers of the United States, I think they would have pointed it out. And the fact they didn't, to me, leans me in the other direction.
What does that mean they would have pointed it out? How would they have done that?
They would have said, except for blah, 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 except for the president of the United States.
But nobody writes laws like that.
Well, they can. There's no,
but again, they could, but we don't historically.
Hang on a sec. We're talking about an amendment, not necessarily a law. It's a little bit different as far as writing. And when we're going forward and talking about amendments, if they said that it wasn't going to apply in this case, they could have. And so I have a hard time coming to the conclusion that when they said officers of the United States, they were implying everybody except for the guy that is in charge of everybody in the office of the United States, that the executive is the one person that is exempt inside of that.
The part that doesn't ring true for me, or at least from a common sense standpoint, is why not just specifically say the president of the United States?
But if you did,
they have electors for the president. They have members of the House, but very specific positions, and yet this one they just throw in there along with the head of the EPA.
Well, what do you mean? Tell me what you mean by officers of the United States. Does it mean?
I think officers of the United States is much more specific, and it's people like even me that took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States when I became a military officer. I think I'd be an office. Go ahead.
Didn't the president take an oath as well?
He did, but if you listen to Chris and take a look at it, that Article 2 oath is different. It is specific to the president. And I think that's the other point. There is an entire article dedicated to one human being, just the office of the president. And within that article, it specifically delineates how you can remove that person from office. And if you do, and convict them on impeachment, bar them from seeking future office. And so all those people that jumped on the let's impeach Trump train that said, we got to do it now, because if we don't do it now, he could run for office again. They were right. It doesn't mean the impeachment was right. I still don't agree with that, but they were right. And so now we're at this place where we think that the people that drafted the 14th Amendment wanted to empower individual states to just simply decide, well, you can't be on the ballot because we've determined you're an insurrectionist. That's tough.
I agree with you on that one. I do not believe that the intent was to give the secretaries of state or anybody on a state level that type of power without any sort of adjudication. And I do understand the idea of that's where the impeachment comes through Congress. Where I have a hard time working it through my brain is the idea that when they said officers of the United States, that it wasn't supposed to cover the chief executive up top. And the fact that we are splitting hairs, in my opinion, we're splitting hairs over the idea of support versus defend. I'm very curious about how we're dividing those two when we're talking about the president of the United States of America. That how do we delineate what is support and what is defense. That if the president in and of himself or in and of herself in that office does not have to, quote, support the Constitution, what does that allow as far as a unitary executive? Because talking about the idea that the president is taking actions that are against the Constitution in some ways doesn't apply, because if the president isn't bound to support the Constitution, then some of those constraints inside the Constitution no longer apply. And
I disagree. I disagree.
Well,
I think
okay, help me understand the difference then between support and defend.
Because the language of that oath was protect, preserve, and defend. And so any of the thing, and somebody texted in here and said, so I guess that means Joe Biden can do anything he wants. No, I don't think that's true. I think if you fail to preserve, protect, and defend, there are consequences. Those consequences are included in Section 2 of Article 2, which is the impeachment clause. But if you have a specifically drafted amendment, and remember, when it comes to the law and specifically the Constitution, every single word matters. A comma matters, because these folks, and there's probably history to this.
Careful with that.
You and I just don't know.
Careful with that, because there's some other amendments that that we may not go that way with. That every word matters and every comma matters. Remember, we've had conversations.
You're going to
about
go with the Second Amendment. It's just it hasn't been interpreted that way.
Again, but hang on a second. But that's interpretation. You're talking about every word mattering, and now you're into interpretation. It's different. That's different. But fairly,
because you have to interpret the words, man. But what you're suggesting here is where they could have said the president of the United States, we should presume they meant it by not including him because they didn't specifically exclude him. Nobody's ever going to interpret it that way, I don't think.
I understand
the other is to say that because the Article 6 oath has support in it and the Article 2 oath doesn't, it doesn't matter. That for purposes of the 14th, where they chose the word support, what they really meant was to include I just think it's a tougher road to go.
Oh, I know. I understand it's a tougher road to go, but what I'm curious about is the fact that because president in the 14th wasn't included, that somehow that exempts him under all the auspices of officer of the United States, under that umbrella. I'm just curious as to why we didn't think that the president is an officer of the United States. And the other one that I still want to hear about is, what's the difference then in the president's execution of office between support and defend? I'm real curious about that, especially in context of the actions taken by Trump and others around him post-November after the election. Is that defending? Is that following his oath? I think that's a very question. We can hang our hat on the idea of support.
There's consequences.
But we can hang our hat on support.
One of the consequences isn't the 14th Amendment, Section 3.
Maybe
that's
not.
What we're saying.
But again, maybe not. Again, depending on the umbrella of officer of the United States. And I'm still curious that he's not one of them.
It seems contrary to common sense to say we've gone so far as to say electors for president. Like we've delineated that specific electors for president, but we don't say president. Instead, we say officers of the United States, and it's going to apply to the president when clearly that position existed. Clearly, they knew that was a thing. There's some history there that hopefully someone will make me smarter on, but it just doesn't make sense. Like when they draft these things, they're presumed to know what the hell they're doing, and they have a specific intent in mind. And that's why the words matter, whether those words get interpreted or not a different way. I don't know, but the term that you use, like, why is he exempted? He's not exempted. That's not how the law works. The law applies to people, specific people, and then it doesn't apply to others. Those other people aren't exempted from it. That just doesn't apply to them.
I understand where you're going with that, but that's my question is, tell me why the umbrella of officers of the United States does not apply to the president, and how far down that chain does it not apply to? Does it not apply to the vice president? What other offices does it not apply to? If we talk about officers of the United States, where does it not apply?
I think that Chris would say, and he's going to say it smarter than I am, is that the president is a unique position. There is no other position in government like that, in the federal government. And what he talked about was everybody below the president is subservient to the president. They are officers of the United States. He is a chief executive of the federal government. That is just different.
But he's the chief executive. What? There's a third word there.
If you want to say officer in terms of CEO, you can. It doesn't make him the same kind of officer of the United States that's in there. It just doesn't make sense that, I know, especially in the and Billy, how do you explain the rank order of things? How do you explain them saying, well, we want this to apply to the president, so first we'll refer to the House and the Senate and electors, and then we'll throw the biggest, most powerful person in the executive branch into the catch-all phrase, officers? Why not lead with that?
But
I mean, doesn't that make sense?
well, here's the thing: the idea then being, well, since they put president in there and then said officers of the United States, what the question would be then? Why didn't they list other people out? Because they didn't list them, the argument, you'd flip the argument 180 degrees. If they had put president in that amendment, the argument would be, well, they only listed that one, and then they said officers. So we were not really certain what that means by officers of the United States. We then could exempt a whole bunch of other people. Yes, that would be the argument. Yes, it would, because the question would be
a silly argument. If you listed president and all other officers of the United States.
Just like it is a silly argument to think that officers of the United States does not cover the guy in the number one office. I that's the part that I can't wrap my head around, that somehow we believe that the person that is the chief executive officer, the person that is in the office of the president of the United States, the person that walks into the Oval Office is not an officer of the United States. I find that hard to wrap my head around.
Electors of the president and vice president. Why not say electors of any officers of the United States?
Is that in the amendment?
Yeah, electors of the president and vice president is verbatim in the amendment.
Yeah. So those are the people that are voting for them. And that,
yeah, I know. But why not just say electors of officers of the United States?
I don't know.
Why would you specifically delineate president and vice president?
But what you're doing is you're talking about but they're not delineated vice president and president in Amendment 14. We're talking about officers of the United States. Why does it not apply to the president?
When you list electors of the president and the vice president, by the way, chronologically before you list officers of the United States, when you include them, why wouldn't you just say electors of any officers of the United States instead of specifically put out president and vice president unless they are different?
Why? I don't see anything about Congress people in there. I don't see anything about any other. There is Congress in there. It says members of the House, members of the Senate. Okay. It's in there. So the president then is not an officer of the United States. That's what we're coming to the conclusion.
This is the argument they're making, not for purposes of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It just wouldn't make sense. I can't think of what the rational argument is for why. Well, of course they didn't include him by name or by title, and of course they didn't include him in priority. Of course they put him after electors.
So, well, okay, that's fine. But then if that is the conclusion, that he is not an officer of the United States and he does not have to support the Constitution.
For purposes of that amendment,
but he does not have to support the Constitution, because that's the thing, because when he takes the oath, he doesn't have to support it. We can't just say for purposes of this amendment, if he takes the oath and he doesn't have to support the Constitution, he doesn't have to support the Constitution. So explain to me then how the idea of executive orders, everything else, are extra constitutional. He doesn't necessarily have to support it at that point. And then all the actions that then Trump takes after an election in November when he loses, those are all okay. All of that is acceptable. All of that is acceptable because, well, he didn't have to support the Constitution.
You're conflating inapplicability of Section 3 with making it okay for him to do anything. That's not true. There are ramifications for his conduct. They just don't include Section 3 of Article 14.
Well, I disagree with that one, because I look at the idea that when you write that the officers of the United States somehow didn't include the president, I look at that and I just don't.
We're blowing up.
Oh yeah. Oh God, we're in trouble here. Listen, I gotta shut up.
Somehow we've rambled on way past. Listen, I got to do something very quickly while Billy uses the F word and move some things around. Listen, advanced hair restoration. This is for men out there. Dudes, if you're out there and you have a receding hairline, you've been dealing with thinning hair for a long time, and you're thinking about giving up the battle for your scalp and just go ahead and shaving, don't surrender. Not yet. Check out advancedhair.com, HAIR, not the rabbit, advancedhair.com. Dr. Tanya Pauls and the Advanced Hair Restoration people have a guaranteed outcome for those who are eligible. You need to find out if you are. You get to feel healthy, look great, get your old self back. All you have to do is check them out at advancedhair.com or call them at 720-459-HAIR, 720-459-HAIR. You qualify for $250 off plus 250 hair grafts for free. Check them out, advancedhair.com. When we come back, I have no idea what's going to happen. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly. To clear the clutter, contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
We're Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS Philly. I don't know how many seconds that we have before you play the music and pull the plug. Billy. What? Yep, Billy. This is how the sausage gets made, folks, right here at 710 KNUS. There's a moment at which music starts to play, and I'm signaled that the show is about to end for the hour. Listen, when we come back, I'm going to get to your calls at 303-696-1971. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Trump. We are halfway through the George Show for this Tuesday, 28 November at 7:10 KNUS. My thanks to Chris Murray and to Billy, honestly, for the conversation that we were having about the 14th Amendment. Let me just reset the stage for a moment. A lot of text participation. We've got a couple callers on the line. Ralph, Dwayne, we have a line open at 303-696-1971. The big question is this. Should Donald Trump be on the ballot here in Colorado? And it's more finite than just a yes or no, like, yes, we should. This is in the context of Judge Wallace, Denver District Court Judge Wallace's 102-page opinion last week that came to the conclusion that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not apply to the office of the President of the United States. And because of that, this guy being the President of the United States, can end up serving, at least again, by being allowed onto the ballot. I had a long conversation with Chris and a long segment that kind of jacked us up on the back end. That's my fault. About whether or not the president has an oath that is so different from the oath referenced in Article 6, because the Article 6 oath says to support the Constitution. The Article 2, which is the executive, it's the President of the United States. Article 2 does not have that word in there. The oath the president takes is very, very different. It says defend, protect, preserve. It doesn't say support. Fast forward to the 14th Amendment, which was enacted, 1868? And it says officers, in fact, you know what? I had it up here, and then like a moron, I ended up closing out my tab because I'm a maroon. Here's what it says. This is the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. I just said it out loud because I'm on congress.gov. And if you're looking for an excuse to think the government is going to hell in a handbasket, it's that this page is now loading, if you'll recall this, like AOL back in the day. Like I think I'm about to hear something like that. God dog it. Here we go. Nope. Everybody apparently is now on this particular congress.gov website. Does it shock anyone? Oh, here it is. Web server is returning an unknown error. Thank you, United States Congress. Let's try something different. Yeah, here it is. This is a private sector website. Works perfectly. This is what Section 3 says. And Billy, listen to this too. By the way, Billy, I didn't tell you this off air, but the kiss of death for your argument is that friend of the show, Dr. Julia, agrees with you. That's it. As you know, that's the end. When you have an oral surgeon / I want to be a dentist, when that person weighs in on your behalf, it's time to pack it in. Here's what Section 3 says. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. That's it. That's the language. And that's what Billy and I were talking about at the end of the last hour there. It is peculiar, in my opinion, that they will specifically delineate electors of president and vice president who are nothings, right? But they're very specific positions. But they don't specifically delineate president or vice president. That's just weird. And the oath part that we talked about, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. 303-696-1971. This isn't an are you a Trump fan or not, because this really doesn't have anything to do with him outside of the alleged conduct. This is about the applicability of this provision to the president of the United States. Ralph, you're on 710 KNUS. Ralph, what do you think? Hello, Ralph.
Hey. Hello?
Hello.
George?
Yes, sir.
Hello? How you hear me?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're reading this inclusively as opposed to exclusively. And I hate to do this to you, but diagram the sentence.
Yeah.
And what you have are no person shall hold, and then you have dot or dot or dot. And the way to look at this, I think, is to basically say, take out the intervening words. In other words, if it is obvious that the guy with the nuclear football, of course it wasn't that after the Civil War,
Right. It was
is
the
an
musket
officer of
football.
the United States, then how about some other folks? And you read it this way. No person shall hold any office, civil or military, or be a senator or representative in Congress, or an elector of the president and vice president who. In other words, you got three separate clauses there,
Okay.
and the word or, which means anyone who is in any of those clauses. That's why they use the word or.
Uh-huh.
You start
Wow.
out with the,
So
okay, now let me give you the
hold on,
explanation
Ralph,
for
is
why
what
to
you're
do it.
saying though that the president is subsumed into the officer thing, or is it different? He's not included.
No. The president is absolutely assumed to be the office by virtue of Article 2, who says he's the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy. That makes him an officer. So now back off from too many words. If it is simply said, and again, strike out the first two clauses, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, blah, blah, blah. Then you'd be fine with that as that being the president.
Well, I'm not
That's why-
convinced. Like when you say the president is the commander in chief and therefore he's an officer, I disagree in this way. We specifically have civilianized the head of the military. So while I'm an officer of the United States, there's no question about that. Is the commander in chief an officer in the same way?
Okay. How do you civilianize him?
Well, he's not a member of the military.
So George Washington was not a member of the military.
Oh, he was when he was a general, not when he was the president. See what I'm saying? That was the genius of the of Article 2. Is they made him the commander in chief, so he was no longer a member of the military. He's in charge of the military as a civilian.
No, but let me. Okay, I see where you're coming from now. It's not a question of the verbiage of Section 3 of Article 14. You've given me that already. Yes?
Yeah, the thing I was just quoting you was from the part you referenced with making him. Go ahead.
No, let's forget about Article 2 for just a minute.
Okay, hard to, but all right.
Pure legal draftsmanship.
Okay.
Do you understand the argument that you start with all officers, no matter whom, and then you add in or senator or representative, or be an elector of the president or the vice president?
Yeah, I understand.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right. Okay. So now we're not dealing with the 14th Amendment anymore. The 14th Amendment is very clear. It covers all officers of the United States, plus senators and representatives, plus electors.
Yeah, but
therefore,
okay. Why delineate it in that order? Why delineate it in that order? Why put electors of the president and vice president? Very specific. Why put that as the number 2 or 3 thing in before officers of the United States? Why do that?
Because otherwise it would say, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, or shall be a senator or a representative, or shall be an elector.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of priority and rank order, that's what you'd say.
George, you're talking about people who are interested in covering all and calling clearly. if you like it ABC rather than CBA, so be it. It's still clear that the president is an officer of the military under the 14th Amendment.
I don't think it's
And
clear.
that's where for me your rabbit goes in the hole, because then you get back to a question of, under the Constitution as originally drafted, blah blah blah, Article 2. Does the fact that it says the president shall be, not just an elected president, that's all the rest of Article 2, but it specifically makes the president an officer. It makes him the commander-in-chief, and the commander-in-chief of the Navy.
Yep, that I just don't see that as applying. It just doesn't make sense to me, Ralph. You can move the things around, but it's not a question of CBA versus ABC. It's a question of which ones are capitals and which ones are lowercase. And why would you specifically delineate? And this is the part I don't get. Electors.
Okay.
Ralph, the tone of your voice doesn't make the argument more persuasive.
No. Go back. Please go back to Article 6.
Uh-huh.
Is that the right one?
That's the one that Chris talked about. Chris Murray, super lawyer.
Okay. Basically, that says all executive officers, and that now I see where you were coming in there. And but if you go, and again, I will give you that the question could be whether or not the President of the United States is a military office.
Okay.
But once you say that it is, then the 14th Amendment is very clear.
Yeah. Can we go to that 6th Amendment because you're there? Because I think this is instructive. This is what Chris was talking about. Go look at Clause 3 of the 6th Amendment. I'm going to read it for the listeners, just like I read the 14th, Section 3. It's called Oaths of Office. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. But no religious test shall ever be required. Blah, 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 blah. So the question is this: does that apply to the President of the United States? Because if so, he ain't been taking that oath since we became a country.
Okay.
And that was the original drafters of the Constitution. So if
Absolutely.
Section 3, Clause 3 of Article 6 doesn't apply to the president, how then do you argue that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies? Same language, same kind of reference to folks.
No, but what you've done is then put the argument back to Article 2 oath, which then raises the question, and you covered it, and I come out differently, but it is that the president is either an officer who is ordered under Article 2, Section 1, to swear a additional oath, because there's no
president
oath
has ever
specified.
taken an additional oath. You know that.
I know they don't, but there's no oath specified in Article 6. It's just you have to support.
Right.
Okay.
And the president has never taken the oath with that word in it. And these were the original drafters. We're no longer looking at the folks that in 1868 put out the 14th Amendment. We're talking about the folks that came up with the oath under Article 2, came up with the language under Section 3 of Article 6. You can't simply say, well, they meant the same thing. That's tough.
No, but you can cut it. But I can flip the argument the same way as the inclusive and exclusive, which is simply this: that if you want someone to be your commander-in-chief, do you want him to swear an ordinary oath, or do you want him to swear an extraordinary oath?
Yeah, I'm sure that the oath is special to the President of the United States because he is a special person in the government. But that being the case, you can't then say he's special. We give him his own oath. But by the way, we treat him like every other officer for purposes of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, just not Section 3 of Article 6. Ralph, I got to let you go, man, because I'm running up on it, and I want to get to the other callers. I want to get to Dwayne and others at 303-696-1971. We got to cut away for a break. Not until I tell you about a gift you can give your house over Christmas. I know you're like, why would I give my house a gift? How about Roll 'em Out Shelves from Brent and Joyce Tolliver? That is the son and mom team that has put together a company that goes out and puts a smile on your face by making your existing house that much more efficient and thus enjoyable. All of that cabinet space you have in your house right now that you store things in, and God forbid you ever need anything out of the bottom one in the back, or you're looking for that hard to find thing you needed for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or whatever, let Brent and Joyce come on out, do a review of all of your cabinet space and tell you how they can make your house better. Kitchen, bathroom, garage, laundry room. And the garage one is the one I'm most excited about. Garage, laundry room. Let them come out and do that. And if you do, you're going to get a special deal from them. And that includes the first 4 installations for free. That's an $80 value. All you have to do is to book your free in-home estimate today, is to call 303-475-9601, 303-475-9601. I got to call them. In fact, I got to get them out to my house, or go to rollemoutshelves.com. M is EM, rollemoutshelves.com. When we come back, it's going to be Dwayne and everyone else on the line at 303-696-1971. And I'm going to try to get through these, good Lord, 24 texts here while we're away. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS, talking about, it's not over yet, by the way. I've had some people text in and say, George, he's on the ballot. What's the big deal? Yep, Trump is on the ballot. And yes, Judge Wallace ruled that the 14th Amendment, at least Section 3, does not apply to the President of the United States. And that's what we've been talking about. And people ask, well, I don't understand what the issue is. Why do we keep talking about it? We keep talking about it because it ain't over. As Chris pointed out, the Colorado Supreme Court's going to take argument on this thing on December the 6th. Oral argument, probably render an opinion pretty quickly after that. And then we're off to the races, man, because whichever side loses, is going to something called the United States Supreme Court with this thing. It's a big deal, and it's not over. And that's why we're having this conversation. And I think even for non-lawyers, and I claim to be one, that's not always true, but I claim to be a non-lawyer. I think understanding how the law works and how it applies matters, because on an emotional gut level, we say, well, of course, a president should be able to be kept off the ballot for the things that they do in office that are bad, including insurrection and rebellion. That's just not how the words read, at least the way they're written, when you compare Section 3, Article 14 to Clause 3 of, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 to Article 6, Clause 3. It's just different than that. And so the question then becomes, and this is a broader conversation. This is true about so much of the law. And that is, well, it should be true. Therefore, can't we interpret it to be true that way? And I don't think you can. That's just not, that's an act, that would be an activist court doing that. What you want is the court to give meaning to the words in that historical context. We don't always agree on what that means, whether it's on the abortion thing or gun rights or whatever. But that's what you want them to do. And it's just, I cannot get there from here that the original drafters of the Constitution that adopted that that Article 6 oath that we talked about, they chose different words than they chose for the very specific oath that applies only to one person on the planet Earth, and that's the president. Just very different. And yet it's the same kind of language that is referenced in that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, drafted much later. It's tough. It's tough. It seems to me that Congress could, or we could, as a function of states, I think it's 3/4 of the legislatures of the states, we could amend the Constitution, make it crystal clear that it applies, but I just don't think you can wish it in there or interpret it in there, because I just think that must be what they meant, even though they made these changes otherwise. I really appreciate the conversation with Ralph. I like the idea of going down the, hey, here's how this comma works. This is how you can read that. I just think it's inescapable when you get to Article 6, which I'd never looked at. And I appreciate Chris Murray pointing that out to me. Let's get right back to the phone lines at 303-696-1971. Dwayne, you're on 710. What do you think?
Well, sir, good morning. And I love hearing all the passion from everybody. The sadness that I see in all of this is that the passion is more of an aggravation because the hatred to this man. I don't agree with everything he did, but I can tell you I enjoyed the policies during his time. We never had anyone slice up a sentence as much as Ralph just did. But if I remember being an American citizen through naturalization, when I said pledge in the oath to become an American citizen, it was yet different than all these others. And I don't think the Congress at that time was willing to sit there and say anything about the president, because they wanted to exclude him because they saw him in much higher regard, whereas now he's nothing more than a whipping boy. But they have that same passion towards Trump if all of a sudden it became that, slime ball in a sea of pus that's in the office now.
I worry about that, Dwayne. I worry about this conversation. And I didn't feel that from Ralph, by the way. I appreciate Ralph doing what I think some appellate judges, maybe even justices, would do. But I think for some, you're right. It's so much about Trump, and Trump shouldn't be president, and Trump shouldn't be on the ballot. They're willing to squint and see things in the words that aren't there. I'm just not ready to do that. And it's not because I'm a Trump lover. Nobody listening to this show is ever going to conclude that. But I do worry about us setting a precedent, as we do with every Supreme Court case, that can be used down the road for someone I do like in a similar circumstance, or someone on the other side of the aisle who, whether I'd vote for him or not, doesn't deserve that kind of prohibition from running for office.
Well, Jimmy Carter is the first one as a post-president to sit there and start smearing Reagan almost immediately. And we always see how bad he polls currently, and I can't wait to get to Plains, Georgia. I have a six-pack and I'm going to ruin some grass. But I sit there and I say that the destruction of the office of president, the president is the commander-in-chief. He is a civilian. Otherwise, we would be known as El Jefe, and there would be nothing more than a banana republic going around. True?
Could be. Yeah, could be.
I mean,
I
you
want to
had-
believe, though, that we haven't set up a system where a president who goes rogue can't be held accountable. I just think that there's a different kind of accountability, and there are different tools in the toolbox. I mean, the Article 2, which deals with the president, has its own impeachment clause in it, right? Like it exists only for that office. Which is weird that we would say, oh, well, then I guess he can do whatever he wants. No, he can't do whatever he wants, but it is true that what can be done to him is different.
Well, exclusively, but I'm saying if we'll just say President X, if he goes into office and he takes over the military, all of a sudden you've got El Jefe like there was in Salvador, Honduras, and everywhere where I was at one point in my life. That's different than our president because he is separated from. And, you can hate certain presidents, and you could look back over history and you can see where certain presidents were so reviled, and yet later in history, they were not only commended for what they did, but they were able to sit there and bring laws and, keep us from becoming banana republics. So we need to sit there and sometimes take a step back, look at the situation and go, I mean, there were certain presidents in my lifetime, I'm only in my 60s, where I sit back and I go, wasn't really happy with him, real happy with that one. And sometimes if they just kept their foot off the gas and idled through the parking lot, I was very happy for those 4 years while they did that.
Yeah, well, and you and I are in agreement on this. This is where the genius of the drafters may actually impact, the framers may actually impact this discussion. But listen, officers of the United States don't take an oath to that office, to the Article 2 president. They don't take an oath to him. They take an oath to the Constitution. And further down the line, you take an oath to follow the lawful orders of whomever and blah, blah, blah. But none of it traces to a single individual. And I think that's where I break with Trump on this too. When Trump talks in terms of his use of the military, and he tries to, when he did that ridiculous Bible crossing the street thing from the White House to the chapel, all of those things fly in the face of that. And I don't know that he recognizes that they're not his generals. It's not his military. They're not his tanks. He is a steward of an office. What's that, Billy?
He calls them his generals.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I don't think he recognizes that. Dwayne does. I do. And I think that that's an important distinction to be made. But I also think the way that Dwayne describes it, and I think he's right, that the Constitution treats the president differently, is a factor here in that Section 3, 14th Amendment discussion. Dwayne, hey, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. Dwayne's line is open, 303-696-1971. Lots of texts here. I'm going to get to those in just a moment. Can I tell you, please, about how to head into these winter holidays pain-free? Now, you've already missed the chance to be pain-free for Thanksgiving. If you've got stuff going on chronically, that means long-term in your knees or your hips, your back, your neck, ankles, I guess, too. My dad's got a bad foot. One of the alternatives to being cut open and having to do a long period of downtime, probably on crutches or a wheelchair or one of those rolly things that you put your knee in, or taking a whole bunch of pills to make you forget about the pain, is to call up our friends at QC Kinetics. You call them up because they're local medical professionals who are part of an organization that has been providing relief to people just like you, border to border, coast to coast, successfully. Now, they have figured out the regenerative medicine thing. That's the using you to fix you thing. It's a needle, not a knife, and no pills. Don't have to go through 2024 with that pain. Make a New Year's resolution, but act on it now. try to get this thing taken care of right now. You can go to qckinetics.com. That's the letter Q, the letter C, kinetics.com. Hey, let me get to some of the texts here. Here's one. This bill that's on Talking Now, William is wicked smart. You have some really smart listeners. I agree with that. Someone says, wasn't Lincoln not on the ballot in several states? Was that a similar legal reason? I responded, the 14th Amendment didn't exist for Lincoln. Remember, it was a product of the Civil War. They wanted to make sure that those folks down in the Confederacy were not given the opportunity to serve in the federal government. That I don't know if there was a similar reason there, but it certainly wasn't the 14th Amendment. Another question. This one I thought was super interesting. Would any president who previously took the oath of office as a member of the military or officer of the United States be held to the 14th Amendment standard? I think you could broaden that and say, would any president who had served as a member of the Senate, like Barack Obama or Joe Biden or John McCain, if he had ever ascended to the presidency, or Mitt Romney, would any of, and he wasn't, by the way, a senator before he was president, so that doesn't apply. Would any president who previously took the oath of office as a member of the military or officer of the U.S. be held to the 14th Amendment standard? That's a great question, because the language of Section 3 says just that they had previously taken it. It says, or as a member state who had previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. Let me look at that. Or under any state who having previously taken an oath. That's such an interesting question. So even, what if you had retired? What if you're Petraeus? You had retired from the army, you end up becoming president, and you engage in something that people later determined to be insurrection. That is a fascinating question. Where's Chris Murray when we get that? Where were you when Chris Murray was on the radio? Come on, man. That's a really good question. Here's another text. Based on Chris M's argument, officers of the U.S. are those subordinate to the president. The president is special and not an officer. I do think that's what he's saying. I agree with you. Another text. Will Dr. Julia allow you to perform dental surgery on her patients? Stay in your lane. Oh, Julia, I sure hope you heard that one, Colonel. Because that is a brilliant text. And yes, be performing oral surgery on a patient of Julia's choosing later today. So if you're under anesthesia at Dr. Julia's office and you just open your eyes for just a moment and think, my God, is that Anderson Cooper? It is, but he's performing surgery on you. Here's another text. What's the difference between support and defend? I think defend is far more specific and active. Like that is an active thing. The support thing is different. But here's why I think there's a difference. Because the people that wrote the words chose different words. This isn't like well, they're synonyms. They must mean the same thing. These are people that perseverated over the precision of the words that they chose. I just can't believe they'd be like, support, defend. It's the same damn thing. I just don't see that. Here's another text. George, don't you know that everything Billy says is correct because he went to college and studied it? First off, if going to college made you smart, I would be, and that's not true, clearly. Let's see all the subjects you've touched on this morning, from the news to constitutional law. I think you now need to address what to do with your leftover turkey recipes for that. That is clearly a direct reference to Billy. Here's another one. Article 2 already delineated the authority of the president. That's why they don't specify it in the 14th Amendment. See, you guys are super smart here. Support equals agree, defend equals uphold and ensure it stays intact. E.g., police don't have to agree with a certain law, but they have to uphold and defend the law. That's interesting. That is interesting. I see the police entirely differently than the president, but that is, so you see the president as more of a police officer for purposes of that oath, maybe? Here is another one. Someone says, president is an officer as well. I responded, different oath. They said, yes, but president is still under the Constitution. There's no question that he is. I just think there's enough here to suggest not to suggest, but to prove that all the people that wrote these words, if they had wanted to specifically include the president, they sure could have. And it would be inconsistent with everything else they did to just simply lump him in as some other officer. Here's another question. Does that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment apply to the Supreme Court? You could envision the Supreme Court engaging, those members engaging in something that would be insurrectionist. Does it apply to them? Because it doesn't by word. So do we say, well, it should be because they say judicial officer specifically of any state. But they don't say that about the United States government. So would you interpret that as, well, it must still apply to the Supreme Court justices because you can't tell me there are no consequences for engaging in an insurrection as a Supreme Court justice. I'm not telling you that. It's not a question of no consequences. It's a question of, does Section 3 specifically address them? It does not. So if it doesn't, do we just interpret it in there because we think, well, that's fair? That's how it should be? That's what I would have done had I been the drafter? I don't think we get to do that. Another text, I don't think Trump did anything all caps wrong, all caps, but if his name was removed, couldn't people just write his name in? I would hope this Dem-run state is not so vindictive, but Polis seems to think he is king of Colorado. God bless. Yeah, so good question. There are specific rules about when you can write in a candidate. That's true. Also, I don't think write-in candidates in 99.9% of the time have any chance of winning, even in a presidential race. But there are specific rules about when you can write in a candidate, and I just don't know what they are. That's a Matt Crane question. Here's Alexa. Is there a website that shows for the appointed judges how many cases they ruled on which were overturned based on an error on the judge's part? By the way, one of the many reasons I do not trust special counsel Jack Smith is because of the number of cases he has prosecuted that were overturned by the Supreme Court. Two different things, Alexa. Let me address the first one. No, not yet. There is no website that does that. And yet you would think for a free people who are all about transparency and accountability, the judicial branch would go ahead and do that all by itself. But they haven't. Instead, you know who's going to do it is our friends at the Denver Gazette. Dave Migoya and a bunch of these folks are working to put together something just like that. And the fact that it's in demand, and everybody I've talked to is like, God, I'd love to know that. I didn't know you can't know the error rate for judges. The fact that it isn't up and running, that says something. That's a metric everyone would want to know. I think the other metric that folks would want to know, and you know, DAs ought to be thinking about this, are rates of conviction and acquittal. Lesser included, maybe, but I mean, acquittals for sure, right? Like if you found out that a DA's office was operating, I'm making this number up because it's outrageous, but like a 40% acquittal rate, like the jurors leave the room going, no crime here, period. You'd be like, what the hell are you doing with your case selection? Same thing with judges. We should want to know that. That's the answer to part one, Alexa. The other thing is, the Jack Smith piece, I think there's something to be said for his convictions getting overturned. But remember, he's not the one going out and just commanding there's a conviction. Those things being overturned are really a condemnation of the judge, because the judge is the one that's supposed to protect due process, the law, and what goes on in the courtroom with the jury. That's the judge's duty. Prosecutor has a vested interest in seeing the judge does it well. But the fact that the case has been overturned, I know people are like, oh, it was a prosecutorial overreach. Okay, yep, he bears some responsibility for that. That's worthy. But the judge who let it happen without consequence, that's the person you want to know what the hell's going on. Why did you do that? I think we should get to know reversal rates for federal judges as well. How is more information about the performance of these government officials a bad thing? Listen, we're going to cut away for a break here. Not until I tell you about Mitch Flory with The Art of Granite. Mitch is our buddy who lives the American dream on a daily basis, not just in his private life, where the guy has this incredible and thriving family. I think his boys, I want to say lacrosse is their sport, and they're great at it. But also in his professional life, which is running The Art of Granite. And The Art of Granite is that business that you call upon to put a smile on your house. Inside your house, you've got countertops. Those countertops are in your bathroom. They're in your kitchen. They might even be in the basement that you're trying to finish or refinish. If you are in that situation or you know someone who is, you tell them, do not go through the internet and Google search 8 billion people and try to, you don't need to do that. You can go one-stop shopping with Mitch Flory at the Art of Granite by calling him on his cell phone, 303-386-5919, 303-386-5919. Here's the deal. You call him, he answers. Instantly, you're getting wholesale prices passed on to you. That's just for calling. The next step is, hi, I'm a George listener on 710 KNUS. He says, I love George. You also get this. Get the kitchen countertop package. I throw in the bathroom countertop for free. Yep. Or if you're like, what if I just want to do one room, Mitch? Mitch says, that's okay. I'll throw in the sink for free with the kitchen countertop or bathroom countertop package. There is no good reason not to call Mitch Flory at the Art of Granite if you're in the market for upgrading your living spaces. theartofgranite.com, theartofgranite.com, 303-386-5919. Going to cut away for a break. Come back. We'll finish up the hour with you, me, 303-696-1971, George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Brauchler back with you here. Final moments of the third of 4 hours. We're going to come back in the 9 o'clock hour. We're going to shift topics a little bit. Tons of text interaction here. Love the phone calls as well. But we're going to shift gears, trying to get Rose Pugliese, she's the assistant minority leader out of El Paso County, on to talk about an issue that's developing down there regarding some obscene books in school and what can be done about them. Stick around. We'll have that conversation and talk with you about it when we come back. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here for the final hour of the George Show. Chuck Kerr coming up next at 10, followed by Dennis Prager, Seb Gorka at 1. And then we go live and local with Jimmy Sengenberger, all E's in that last name. That's Easy Jimmy, as he's called on some social media sites. And then we go with Officer Brandon Tatum from 4 to 7. You got to give a listen to Brandon. I know that it's a transition from Stefan, and having someone that speaks English is really a challenge. I'm kidding, Stefan, if you're listening. But that is something worth listening to. Give it a shot. Now, right now, I'm pleased to bring up on the VIP line Rose Pugliese. She's a friend. She's also the assistant minority leader in the House, one of the 300 standing in the gap there, trying to keep Colorado from being completely overrun. But we're not talking to Rose today about the legislature as much as a letter that she penned and was nice enough to send to me from about a month ago. It was on Halloween 2023, October 31st. But it's something that has now caught the attention of some of the news outlets, specifically 9 News, that did a story about a petition that was gathered by some influential public figures in El Paso and forwarded on to District Attorney Michael Allen. With that small tease, Rose, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks, George. Always great to be here.
Now, listen, can you set the stage for us? Tell us what is going on here that has now caught the attention of Kyle Clark and the others.
So it's interesting. As a lot of our school board candidates were campaigning, they had heard about, books that might be in our school libraries that are inappropriate. And so some parents that were concerned and just some people in the community had talked to me about it. Obviously not the purview of the legislature, but we want to be supportive, or I would like to be supportive of the concerns of my constituents. And so I did have some conversations with some school board members, some candidates, and then this petition drive was going on, and they had asked if I wanted to sign on. And I thought, it was important that I be able to voice the concerns of my constituents that have approached me. And in addition, I have a new middle schooler and want to make sure the books are appropriate. And so I penned a separate letter. It's a little bit different than the petition that was circulated. But it was basically just asking for a collaborative process just to make sure, if these books are appropriate, as a lot of people are saying they are, then fine. Then let's just have an independent third party take a look and make sure that the right policies are in place to help support our school boards and also put parents' minds at ease. And so that was the purpose of this letter, was to basically, I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to, but I do have some good resources and want to make sure those resources are also available to our school boards. So that was really the purpose of the letter that I sent.
I think, do you know of anyone else that signed the petition that submitted a separate letter as you did?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it's important, though, because the petition itself, and by the way, you're a parent of a kid, you said, as a middle schooler in this exact district, right? In Academy District 20, is that right?
Yes. And then I represent 2 other districts, District 11 and District 49 as well.
I just think that's important because you have a different kind of skin in the game, and that's your child. The issue here that I think makes you different than some of the other petition signers, we just don't know who else submitted a letter, is that this petition, and I haven't seen it, Rose, I don't know if you have a copy of it. I haven't seen it, but it is sent to District Attorney Michael Allen, Super DA from the 4th down there, which covers El Paso and Teller counties. And it asks Michael to, and I'm using language from the article because I don't have the petition, to seek legal penalties against, this is from the article, against people promoting or possessing obscene material. Your letter takes a different approach with a similar outcome, which is, look, let's figure out what's going on here and then try to either keep it from the kids or figure out something else. But it isn't an outright call for, let's get the DA to take legal action. Why did you want to take a different, I'm going to use the phrase, more measured approach?
I'm an elected official as well. And so I know, sometimes there are things that people think are happening that aren't actually happening. And so I think the first step is to make sure that we have all the information and that the information is accurate. And then we can kind of move up the ladder. But I thought starting with a more collaborative process to evaluate whether we've got the resources in our schools to make sure that these, if there are inappropriate books, like I said, if these books are appropriate and everyone's evaluated them and they're fine, then let's put parents' minds at ease. If not, then, let's take action to make sure these books are not available to our kids. And so I think, I have a great deal of respect for DA Michael Allen. And I think that he is a good person to be able to reach out for those resources. But I think we kind of have to take a step back first and make sure that we actually understand the issue as it lays.
I think that makes a lot of sense too. I'd love to get, and I'll reach out to Ken DeGraff and some others to see if they can tell us. Do you have, by description, because in the article here or the online piece by Kyle and the 9 Newsers, they're like, oh, Rose hasn't read any of the books or anything like that. What was described to you as what these books were about and what they contained?
Well, there were just some questions as to whether they were sexually explicit or, far exceeding what children in our schools should be reading. And yes, I have not spent the time in the 6th grade library at the middle school to read every book. That's fair. And in fairness to me, I said that in the letter, right? I don't pretend to be an expert in this. I don't pretend that I've read every book. But I think asking for assistance and getting some people engaged that could give us some good answers, and again, put people's minds at ease, especially parents who have come to me, I think is a responsible way of handling the issue.
I think that's a big deal too, because the only reason I can think of that 9 News would focus on this the way that they do is because, again, this feeds that narrative of, hey, the Republicans are out there trying to burn books, ban books, shut down books. And this is just another piece of that conversation that they're trying to have. In fact, they reference it throughout their article here online, is that this is just another attempt to do that. I am intrigued not by the idea of parents getting involved in saying, what the hell are we showing our kids? Which, by the way, I don't want there to ever be pushback from a library that's publicly funded about, hey, can we talk about the books you're making available to kids? That should never be an issue of controversy. The issue is,
I agree.
What do we think is obscene? What do we think is inappropriate, and what steps can be taken? What's unique about this petition, in my opinion, is it's asking the chief law enforcement officer for what is about to become the largest judicial district in the state of Colorado to look at potential criminal action for making those things available. Dang, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, again, I think we just need to take a step back and evaluate the processes we have in place, and gather more information. And like I said, I think our DA is an incredible DA, and I think he's a good person to kind of bounce these ideas off and make sure the right policies are in place. And again, if the books are appropriate, then great. That will shut down the conversation. But I agree with you, George, on exactly what you just said, right? There should never be pushback, and I will say I've gotten a ton of pushback this morning, but there should never be pushback on a parent just questioning whether books are appropriate and what the process is for evaluating that, and making sure that our kids have access to things that are appropriate and that things that are not appropriate are flagged. I think that we have that right to engage in that process as both a mom, but also just a concerned citizen. So I think it's, like I said, I believe that my letter is the proper approach for just asking the right questions and being responsible without having to read all the books myself.
I agree with you. I also think, too, that if there are public schools or libraries out there that want to be above scrutiny and we ought to just trust their educated judgment, Open your own damn library, have a privately funded library, and then you can set whatever rules you want. But as long as you're taking taxpayer dollars and we're trusting our kids with you, just answer the damn questions, right? Like if a parent comes in, just don't be offended. Say, let me talk you through the process. Let me show you this thing. Let me hear your concerns. Let me address them. You don't have to reach agreement. You don't have to bend the will of the parents. But this idea, Rose, that you're receiving any sort of pushback from folks who just lump this in as another attempt to just sort of ban books or whatever, I think is offensive to the notion of accountability to parents and taxpayers.
No, I agree. And I was disappointed in the way that 9 News kind of framed this, or at least my letter, right? Focusing on the fact that I don't know how many parents have sat in the middle school library and read through every single book that's in there, but that's what they focused on. Not the, hey, can we work collaboratively to make sure that there are resources to properly evaluate these books, to give our school boards and our school districts the support that they need, to engage people maybe outside of the system to give a fresh look. It's disappointing that that's not what they focused on. Because I think that those are important conversations and important questions, and we all have the right to know those answers.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's take it one step farther, though. Let's pretend for a moment that you get a chance to look at these books. And even Michael Allen, the DA, weighs in on this and says, I do think that these things are obscene, which I don't expect him to say that, by the way, and not because they aren't obscene, but, and we'll talk about that later. But do you want to see those librarians, whoever the hell it is that's responsible for them, do you want to see them prosecuted, or do you want to see a different outcome or two outcomes? I don't know. What is it what's your expectation?
Like I said, I think first we take a step back and we actually do a good evaluation with outside resources. I think that that's a good approach. I'm not the DA. I don't know that what these people have done rise to level of criminal. I'm also not a criminal attorney. So at this point, I think it's more important, and to the parents that I've talked to, I think it's just more important that they know, like, put their mind at ease that either these books are or not appropriate. I think that's what they're looking for. And if there's policies that need to be changed in order to ensure there's a different process, I think that's what they're looking for, at least the people who have talked to me. So I think that my letter is a responsible way of getting some of those answers.
I do too.
And then determining what the next steps are. And I trust our DA to do whatever is appropriate as far as what those next steps might be.
Well, and what I'm referring to there, and I think you've said it, is the last paragraph. I'm just going to read it. It is my request that you work collaboratively with the district leaders to be sure they're properly evaluating the books in our school libraries and have informed policies to prevent this issue in the future. I do think that's a measured approach. I think it's tough to involve the DA in those discussions because they feel like they're a parents, school board, superintendent kind of a discussion to be had. But when you get to this point where you think it's pornographic, potentially, not saying you think it is, but where it's potentially pornographic, there may be some area for the criminal law there. My other concern here is, if there's an approach to school libraries or the books that says, hey, we can put things here available to the kids, we can make them available to the kids that we would never allow a teacher to say out loud in a classroom, that's a problem too. Or we'd never allow them to show these things. There's a disconnect there. If the teacher can't teach on it in front of a bunch of students, it probably shouldn't be available in a book to them, especially at those tender ages.
No, I agree. And I think that, involving the DA is important just to deal with potential questions, right, about the pornographic nature of these books. And I want to just point out in my letter, I say potential pornographic books. Because, I think that the DA's got a good ability to discern whether they rise to that level or not. And again, maybe, give some resources or some additional information to strengthen policies that make parents feel more comfortable with the books that are available to their children. So I think it's just important to have the conversation.
I do too, and only because he might be listening to either this or a podcast, and he is a friend. I just want to say, allowing Michael Allen to define what is pornography, that's setting the bar really high. That guy is a Navy guy. I'm kidding. Almost nothing would be pornographic for him. You know what I mean? Like in the Navy, it's like that. Keep going. Next. You know what I mean? I'm just joking. Listen, Rose Pugliese, assistant minority leader, but really in this context, much more of just a mom of a kid who's in a school that may have these books in it. Thank you for taking time out of your morning to have a conversation with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to dialogue about it. I think it's an important issue. Yeah.
Of course. That's Rose Pugliese, assistant minority leader. Listen, what do you think about all that? What's your reaction to that? Is this the next step? Is this what we should be doing? Is the petition seeking DA intervention in some of these issues? I appreciate Rose's different approach. And while it's to join the petition, it was to clarify, hey, listen, man, and that last paragraph kind of sums up Rose's approach. I want you to work collaboratively. That's far different than, hey, please pursue any potential legal charges. I think the other thing to know is the DA isn't built for collaboration on these issues. Doesn't mean he can't do it. And if anyone can get to the end zone on this, it'll be Michael Allen. But as DA, it would be tough to be asked to try to intervene on issues of textbook appropriateness. That would freak me out a little bit. Doesn't mean I couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. I just need to know what that looks like. My question to you is, do you want the DA involved in pursuing potential obscenity charges against a school, public or private, who provides certain books that are questionable to kids, or at least access to them? 303-696-1971. Let me tell you about Gay Ribble and Empower Home Team. Got to do it before we cut away for a break, and then we'll come back. Some funny texts that have come in here. By the way, keep the text coming. If you are at all thinking about selling your home, upgrading your home, or downgrading the size because, hey, all the kids have moved away, or you just have different needs, hell, you've got a new job and you got to move across town, or maybe you're moving into or out of Colorado. The one-stop shop you need is Gay Ribble with the Empower Home Team of Keller Williams. Here's why. One big word: guarantee. They guarantee to sell your home at a certain time and a certain price that you agree upon. And if they can't, then they make up the difference with money. That guarantee leads to the next big word: trust. They earn your trust by their decades of performance and what they'll promise to do and deliver for you. So whether it's you or your neighbor or someone else you know that's like, I think I need to move, tell them to call Gay Ribble at 833-301-SOLD, 833-301-SOLD. Or you can check them out at sellwithcertaintycolorado.com, sellwithcertaintycolorado.com. Stick around. It's you, me, 710 KNUS.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll them out shelves. Your clutter transformation experts create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll them out shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll them out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. My thanks to Assistant Minority Leader Rose Pugliese, who was really kind of calling in, even though the letter was sent on her letterhead, really calling in as a parent, a concerned parent, who happens to also be in the legislature, on a letter that she sent along with a petition she signed with a bunch of other public officials down there to DA Michael Allen, asking him to intervene regarding some books that are in schools that some are arguing are obscene or contain profanity. 303-696-1971 is the number. I'd love to get your reaction to this. Is this the direction that we want to go? And again, I kind of pull Rose out of it. She was a great vehicle for the conversation, but her letter is very specific. She wants Michael Allen to collaborate with the other people that are stakeholders in this to come to the right answer. That's a far cry from, hey, use your authority to go prosecute these people. But I guess my question is, should DAs be involved in this discussion? 303-696-1971. You don't need to ban books if you're prosecuting the people that touch them. And I think that's the direction that 9 News wants to take this with their story. Do you agree or disagree? Rick, you're on 710 KNUS. Rick, what do you think?
Hey, thanks for the good work. Yeah, I'm a book collector actually, and on sale now commercially is a crafts book, and the second letter of adjective starts with an S. It's that 4-letter ugly word people use too much in this country, with a TY on the end of it. Crafts book, put out by Chronicle Books. Yeah. It's a new issue. It's all decorated and everything, a little oversized and all that. So that's kind of one of the things feeding into the environment we got here.
Well, what do you think about that? Is that something that you might think it's, hey, I think that's obscene in the street use of obscene, kind of like street crazy versus.
Well, the formal title, it's just, no, I don't like it at all. I don't see the point in it. But anyway, it's out, that kind of stuff. I'm just telling you, thanks for your good work.
What do you think, Rick, about this effort?
Well, I wouldn't want it in the schools.
Yeah, no, but I'm asking you, what do you think about the effort to involve the DA in that process versus anything else? Like the DA is kind of like a sledgehammer, right? Not a scalpel guy, right?
Oh, really?
The DA has a lot of state authority, but not to do like really fine-tuning work.
Well, I don't know that much about it really, but I think it's worth looking into. It's an important issue. Do people have to put up with this stuff? I mean, if the people want to put it out, it's their right and all, but it just seems outrageous. Why have a foul title?
You're right to bring up that it's someone else's right to try to get something published, no doubt. But you're also right that when it goes from publication to inside of our schools, it's a different analysis. Yeah. Who do you want to see in charge of making the decisions of what books get to be in our schools' libraries?
Well, the general public be appraised of what's going on. Yeah. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know. I just giving my feelings on it. I think the schools are pretty democratic in a way, so they should be talking about it, but they should reflect on the attitudes it sets in the young people, really.
I'm interested to know whose role this is. Like, is this a superintendent role? Is this a school board role? You know who we should get for this topic is Ken Witt. Ken was on the school board in Jeffco. He's now the school superintendent down south in El Paso County. It would be interesting to get his feedback on this. Hey, Rick, a great phone call. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Hey, Rick's line is open at 303-696-1971. Joan has chimed in with, I think collaboration is another means of deciding the issue. These parents have tried to work through the system, now doing things like checking out the public library books and not returning them, which I think is called theft. The libraries will automatically renew for up to 6 months and do not fine for late books. The Catholic Church has a program that does this during Pride Month. Is that the right thing to do? Joan, honestly, you object. That standard means each individual parent gets to decide what books my kids can be exposed to. Because if they happen to disagree with one, they can check it out and never return it. And the only alternative is you and I have to foot more taxpayer dollars to come up with a replacement volume. I don't like that kind of, I don't know what that is, social disobedience or civil disobedience, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a big fan of that approach to it because it sets the bar too low. Here's another one from Joan. It is like the satanic Christmas tree at the RR Museum in Wisconsin. I don't know that one. The Catholic Church used to support the finding of obscenities, ban in Boston. This is one of the reasons parents are leaving public schools. I agree with that too. I think when parents feel like they lack the ability to influence the negative stuff their kids are exposed to, they think, well, where else can I go to do this? I agree with that part. But what's the answer here? Do you want the district attorney involved in investigating whether or not these books are objectionable to the point of being criminally prosecutable as profanity or pornography or obscenity? I mean, listen, if they had, I'm trying to think of the magazines that nobody would question whether or not it was pornographic. Billy, what were you looking at in high school? It probably has a P at the beginning of it, whatever the title is, but you know what I'm talking about. If they were putting those things on the shelves, yeah, you got to do something about it. But remember, if the DA's getting involved, that's tantamount to saying I could send the popo in there. Police show up. They say, hey, the DA's looked at this book. The DA thinks it's obscene. We're going to scratch you a ticket, or we could arrest you. I mean, dang, that's tough, man. I'm not down with that. I would be more interested in, collaboration for sure, but I would be more interested in pushing this issue through the school board and the superintendent. And my guess is what they're going to say is, well, school board disagrees. And it's like, yeah, well, okay, now what? It's like, we're just going to keep looking around till we find someone who agrees with us, who has the authority to make a change. Maybe, I don't know, it's just a tough spot to put the DA in. Here's one. I'm not one to have government, quote, allowing books, but libs or anti-Americans are looking to groom kids into thinking in certain ways, just like religious fundamentalists would do. There has to be a system to not let strange libs corrupt children into their narcissistic perversions. Oh, by the way, who the hell's reading books? I'm not kidding. And if you're looking for the weakest link in terms of what our kids get exposed to, I'm telling you, it's TikTok, and then it's YouTube. My kids see more content from TikTok and YouTube than they do from any other source, school included, a school in which they sit for 7-8 hours a day. That's the issue. I mean, you put these books in the library. I'm not saying it's a non-issue. I'm just saying, what kids are out there reading books? Is that the big risk? And if the material in the libraries meets the statutory definition in Colorado of obscene, imagine what some of the stuff that's accessible to kids through YouTube or TikTok would be. And what do you do about that? Let me read you the statute here. 18-7-102. That's the Colorado Revised Statutes, and I'm going to keep telling you about this. 18 is Title 18, just like with the feds. That's the criminal code, especially for adults. Article 7 is the next number, and Section 101 those are the next sections. So it's Title, Article, Section 18-7-102. I'm going to read it to you. Except as otherwise provided in subsection 1.5 of this section, a person commits wholesale promotion of obscenity if, knowing its content and character, such person wholesale promotes or possesses with intent to wholesale promote any obscene material. That's a Class 1 misdemeanor. Now, thanks to our do-gooder legislature on the left, they've reduced the penalties down for that to a very illegal immigration-friendly 364 days in jail. Not mandatory, all probation eligible. This is what 1.5 says. A person commits wholesale promotion of obscenity to a minor if, knowing its content and character, such person wholesale promotes to a minor or possesses with intent. Just a lot of words here. That's a 6th-class felony. That's the lowest class felony. 6 is the lowest class. It is punishable by up to 18 months in the Department of Corrections. Not mandatory also. That is probation eligible. This is just kind of nuts, the way this thing is laid out here. Let me see here if I can find 6 or more materials presumed. So this could be a felony that they're looking to see prosecuted. And this Article 7 is offenses relating to morals. So Section 101, defines obscenity. Here's what it says. This is 18-7-101 subsection 2. Obscene means material or a performance that A, the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest in sex. Anybody? What the hell does that mean? What's the prurient interest? And I've seen that word a billion times since I started law school. What does it mean? What is a prurient interest in sex? Here's B. Depicts or describes patently offensive representations or descriptions of ultimate sex acts, normal or perverted. You know, the bar for what is perverted sex acts, I imagine, has been reduced so much over time. It's hard to imagine anymore what fits that definition. Actual or simulated, including sexual intercourse, sodomy, and sexual bestiality. I'm not even sure you can read the statute to kids. Statute may be obscene. Or patently offensive representations or descriptions of, these are the words in the statute, folks. If this isn't FCC compliant, not my fault. Representations or descriptions of masturbation, excretory functions, sadism, masochism, lewd exhibition of the genitals, the male or female genitals in a state of sexual stimulation or arousal, or covered male genitals in discernibly turgid state. And I'm now going to get Billy for Christmas a sweatshirt that says, I'm in a turgid state. I don't even know what that means. Taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Here's patently offensive. Means so offensive on its face as to affront current community standards of tolerance. Dang. That to me feels like it could change between Boulder and El Paso County. They could have different books on the shelves for the same age kids. Here's something else. They define prurient interest, 6.5. Means a shameful or morbid interest. What is that? Billy, what's a shameful or morbid interest? I don't really have a sense of it from that description. I think I know what pornography is. I think
that's this
what's
show.
that?
That's this show.
This show?
Yeah, that's a description. That's the title. That's what we're going with. Yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah,
we're obscene. Is what
absolutely. Yes, as often as possible. Yes. Much
Listen,
to the chagrin of the people in charge.
Are we in the 18th Judicial District or are we in Beth's? Because
I don't know. I never actually checked that one. I just do.
are we
zip codies and
physically
stuff.
in Denver? I keep saying it because I know we're right about the border, but are we in Denver? Or are we in
No,
Aurora?
we're Aurora. Yeah, technically, well, where the station is, we're in Aurora. Yeah, technically,
because you know Kellner's a Marine,
Yeah.
and his standards and obscenity, much like Michael Allen's, who's in the Navy,
much different.
So ridiculous.
Yes.
You couldn't find anything.
No.
I mean, for Marines, they just call that morning.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, that's what the statute means. Go ahead.
No, this is a weird one. The idea of, what's obscene, what's not, and the idea of, do you take the work as a whole, or do you focus on those smaller parts? And the idea being, and it's a difficult conversation, the idea of Huckleberry Finn, that do you take that as a work as a whole, or do you focus on the repeated use of the N-word and how they treat people during that, during that time? And so where is it? What's the value inside of that? And I think that's really the base question. And I have just because of the way I'm wired, I have a real barrier to telling kids not to read books based on certain things. Now, again, I'm not saying go out and read the pornographic books, but if there are books that have certain descriptions, it's a difficult one for me. And I would submit to the audience that there are a number of books that my children have read that some of you would deem as inappropriate based on their age. One of them, my oldest, he started reading Stephen King when he was in 6th grade. He was walking around with books that were over 1,000 pages long, and he read them front to back. He is a Stephen King fanatic, but there are portions in that book, not necessarily pornographic, but as far as descriptions of death and some other things that you could talk about and say, does someone at that mental age need to be exposed to that? It's a good question. And there are other examples I can give of books that some people in the audience would say, no, your children at that age should not be allowed to read that. However, I sat down and had a discussion with them beforehand. And it's the idea of this is what you're going to read, and this is it, and we're going to talk about it afterwards, and we're going to talk about your feelings, and we're going to talk about what you read, what you liked, what you disliked, and exploring that. But I'm not expecting every parent to do that, and I don't think they may have the time or the effort, and some of them aren't even engaged in that level. So I don't know. I don't think that I'm the best or the rightest answer in this situation.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I think Huckleberry Finn, and this is the other side of the coin, right? These are the other do-gooders out there who are saying, let's ban this book, not because it's obscene, but because they deem it to be racially insensitive or whatever, which is clearly not covered by this obscenity statute. That's covered by something else. But are these birds of a feather, which is an effort to try to preclude books from being accessible to kids. And I do think there are books that should be inaccessible to kids. I'm just, as the DA guy, I'll talk about it when we come back, but there's a different approach to this. I just don't know if it was taken. We'll find out later when Michael finally comes on to talk about this, whenever he gets done doing his due diligence. Listen, let's cut away for a break. Not before I tell you about a guy who loves books, and he has read so many of them. His name is Dan Kaplis. He is there for you. He's not going to hunt you down. You pick up the phone and call him. Why? Because somebody has hurt you or a loved one. Maybe not even on purpose, maybe negligently, recklessly, and they've changed your life. Listen, this isn't the guy that you call when you've had somebody tap you from behind and you've had a little bit of pain. That's not this guy. This guy isn't chasing you down to try to get as many cases in the door as possible to make a quick hit, put a couple bucks in your pocket. That's not why you call Dan Kaplis. You call Dan Kaplis because your life is appreciably worse, and there are no alternatives available to you to try to compensate for what's been taken. That's when you call Dan Kaplis and his partner, Barbara Wahid, at the Kaplis Law Firm. You can check them out at dankaplislaw.com. Caplis is how you spell Kaplis. But if it's me, I skip that part. I go right to the phone, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. Ask any of the nice people there, and they'll talk you through the process. You get Dan on your team, you get to be a winner, at least in terms of the court process. Hey, stick around. We'll be back to wrap up the show. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS. Final moments of the show. I want to do a couple things. One, acknowledge that there is another statute that I have found that is 187-103, subsection 2, that specifically empowers the DA to seek some type of an injunction against a person, firm, or corporation who wholesale promotes blah, 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 blah. Now, I guess that probably applies to a school. It just seems like there's a different process there because of the public accountability piece. Anyway, there'll be more to talk about with that in the future. Before we sign off here, I got to tell you about our good friends at QC Kinetics. They're the folks that have figured out a way to give you that pain-free life if the pain that plagues you is in your joints, your knees, your hips, your back, maybe your neck, maybe your ankles, elbows, shoulders, doesn't matter. These guys do regenerative medicine at the highest possible levels. You pick up the phone and call them and quiz the hell out of them. 303-900-8986. Call them, ask them every question you have, and then sign up to avoid the knife, avoid the pills, and get to living the best life that you can as soon as you can. 303-900-8986. You can check them out at qckinetics.com. That's qckinetics.com. Billy, I don't even know how much time we have left yet because I feel like I've lost how much? Oh, Billy says music right now. My thanks to Chris Murray, a superstar, super legal mind. My thanks to Rose Pugliese, last minute add-on, who did a great job of telling us what's going on down there with the books. Tomorrow, it'll be you and me, the Bills. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.